series. This is the third part in our series. We have previously discussed Shanae and Noel, and last week we got to spend some extra time with some of our favorite secondary characters. But tonight is the much awaited discussion about some of our favorite punching bag characters, Kousuke and Alyssa.
If you're reading I Love You and the recent chapter left you blue, or feeling like it's too good to be true, we get together and share our theory, bend down and praise the almighty Quincy. Come join us for tea with Trashellie.
One thing that I would like to go ahead and get out of the way before we get into this is a big thing about this series is that we are kind of talking about characters' motivations and goals, what they ultimately want out of life. Or rather than that, what are their ultimate needs and how that factors into what their goals are. And we feel very strongly that Kousuke and Alyssa are the kinds of characters who, in general, have been kind of misunderstood by fandom. Alyssa especially. She's one of those characters who, even still at this point in time, is considered a character who is an attention seeker, a fame seeker. People look at her as stepping on others just in order to seek out attention and fame. And that's not really who she seems to be through the text. And that is something that we plan to address tonight, right, Elle?
Absolutely. She's got a really interesting, deep dive into goals to look through for her. And obviously, people who have been around in this podcast, we talk about Kousuke and Alyssa a lot. We have sprinkled them through basically every episode that we've done. But this is going to be kind of a nice, succinct dive into their two characters, similar to the previous episodes that we've done.
Right. Something that we can kind of have all in one place that we can point people to, somewhere that people can sit here and go, you know what? I just kind of want to sit and think a little bit about Kousuke and or Alyssa, and here is your place. And it's true. I think it's become very obvious to everyone who's been listening all along that Kousuke and Alyssa are characters who have become really strong favorites of ours, even though there was a time where neither Elle nor I liked Kousuke or Alyssa at all. If you go through my Reddit history, if you go through my Tumblr history, if you look through my chat logs with people, you will find that once upon a time I detested Kousuke. And that I did see Alyssa as the attention-seeking, kind of fickle girl who I think the way I viewed her at the time was as somebody who paid more attention to her own needs than others. I don't think I necessarily thought that she was a horrible person as much as I felt that she didn't pay attention to other people's needs. And as you can see, the more that we really talked about Kousuke and Alyssa, the more I started to see those parallels and foils between, Kousuke and Noel, between Alyssa and Shanae. The more we really started to dig into that, the more I really came to see that there's so much more to them than meets the eye, which is a big part of what really got the podcast going in the first place. Talking a lot about how Kimchi has a lot of tropes that she subverts, how she introduces characters to us, and this is our first impression, and how our first impression is very often not correct. How she sets up a character and she wants us to see them a certain way, but she subverts that later. She introduces Alyssa as the really terrible, awful girlfriend, Shanae's really horrible ex-friend who, did something so awful and traumatizing that, Shanae is still struggling with it to this day. And, you think, oh, that's who this girl is. And then over time, she starts to reveal a little more. Elle, who do we want to start with tonight? We didn't plan this.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Oh, the chat. We can ask the chat.
Chat, who do you want?
I see one vote for Kousuke.
Oh, there's typing. Oh,
Okay.
2, 3 votes.
Multiple votes for Kousuke.
Wet cat time!
Starting with the wet cat. My heart
Yay!
says Alyssa, but my mind says Kousuke.
Oh, so we're gonna start strong and end sad. Okay. All right. So one of the first pieces that I ever wrote for I Love You, where I actually sat myself down and said, I'm going to construct a piece where I actually organize my thoughts, was when I had finally realized that, so there's a Curious Cat question where somebody asked Kimchi that, or is there a reason that Noel and Kousuke are kind of introduced as the first and second leads of a drama, or love stories and stuff? Because it was clear that they're not quite supposed to be, but somebody was digging in, right? And she said, yes, there is a reason. And it was clear to me at the time that there is something, because I'd figured by that point Kousuke is not a love interest, and he had never been, part of a love triangle that didn't exist, right? But he still was very much set up, much like your stereotypical first lead of, your stereotypical old K-drama or shoujo mangas and stuff. You've got the rich chaebol. He's such an asshole, but you think he probably has a heart of gold, right? He's going to be a jerk to everybody except the main character. Something about her is going to get to him, right? And you kind of get those moments like when the three of them go out to dinner and he puts his hand on Sinead's and they have that little heart-to-heart moment, and it's all right there, and people think, yeah, that's it, he's the first lead, that it's all right there. And I can't remember at what point in time we were at in the story, but that was when I was starting to put things together that, okay, Kousuke's written as this first lead, but he's not a first lead. He is an asshole with a heart of gold, except he doesn't have the heart of gold. And that was the first thing that I ever wrote. I posted it to Tumblr first because I was like, oh my God, I think Reddit is probably really sick of me. I've been there so much, they'd probably find me so annoying. And then I eventually posted it over to Reddit. So I don't know if any of you guys ever read that. But if you did, that's old. But it's really funny that the first thing I ever really wrote was about Kousuke, considering at that time I couldn't stand him. And I think I made it clear in my writing that I was not very fond of him yet. And I should probably go reread that for myself, and maybe I can rewrite it to be a little kinder to him. But, to be fair, that is a lot of what Kousuke's personality is. He kind of is a standoffish asshole. And that's part of his problem. That's what he struggles with, because one of the things that Kousuke has come to realize that he struggles with, one of those unmet needs of his, is that he is not like Noel. He doesn't just make friends. He doesn't communicate with people. He's not good at those things because he never learned to. And he doesn't admit it. Well, he eventually admits it. But he is so jealous of that,
And something that I've said before is Kousuke, he is a very sensitive person. He is a sensitive little emotional boy, but he is also an extremely prickly person, right? And
right.
So he struggles a lot with the dichotomy of those two things, where you said, he is envious of people who are just it's just easy for them, or he perceives that it's just easy for them, and people flock to them and just like them, when he struggles so incredibly much with it. And it's that on the one hand, it's the kind of innate part of his personality where he is a prickly little sensitive boy, and he just naturally kind of struggles with that. But part of it is also that, like you said, he wasn't brought up to understand genuine social dynamics,
Right. we talk a lot about how Yui knew exactly what she was doing, and she was so good at it. The way she isolated him and cut him off from people, he never got that opportunity to build those meaningful relationships and to learn how to develop those kinds of relationships. And I know, like, on the flip side, we can't say that Null necessarily had that same opportunity, because we know he was still very young when they moved to the United States of Asia, and that, it was all downhill for him from that point. But he still had, other kinds of nurturing moments that I think benefited him. Whereas, like we said, Kousuke, he already has that sensitive prickliness on top of the lack of ever getting the opportunity to build those meaningful relationships. And on top of that, it was the expectation that was created that you are at the top of this food chain. People come to you. You don't go to them. You don't bow or bend to anybody. And so even as that yearning built up inside of him, he had to learn to quell it and tell himself, no, you don't want that. That's something that normal people want. That's for people like, Noel, the loser people, even though that's what he has wanted all along.
And it's like, so much of the foundation of Kousuke and Alyssa, the foundation of both of them, is that, like, lack of normal nurturing and loving dynamics where, like, I think it was you, it could have also been someone else, this is a long time ago, but someone said that one of the ways to understand Alyssa is that her social status is a lot more similar to Kousuke than it is to Shanae or Noel, or like the way that she is supposed to function in society.
Mm-hmm.
And that plays in so strongly to how both of them were brought up, where they weren't brought up in any sort of, like, true nurturing or love. They were brought up with all of these expectations and, like, navigating around other people without ever actually connecting with them and putting yourself out into the world through a lens of success, but not through a lens of authenticity. And we see that really, really carry through to who they are today.
Right. What is normal for them is not what is normal for Shanae and Noel. They come from incredibly different worlds. Alyssa is not quite on the same socio status level as Kousuke, but she is closer to his status than, she is to Noel and Shanae. And we even see that when when Shanae goes to visit Alyssa. She lives in this giant house with all of these really expensive items, things that, Shanae has never even laid eyes on in her life before. Like, Kousuke, if they were given the chance when they were younger, before they were completely traumatized and, completely messed up, Alyssa and Kousuke probably could have gotten along so well, just because they have that same understanding of, how you can be somebody's peer without, being so vulnerable that you put yourself out there. And I think, yeah, that is the difference. Kousuke doesn't know how to make himself vulnerable because he was never taught to. That's like the number one no, that, you don't do that. That's how Noel and Shanae are able to befriend each other. And that's also why Shanae can resonate with Kousuke the way that she does, because she does make herself vulnerable to him. And while he might look at that and see that as like a sign of weakness or foolishness, we can see that it has made a lasting impact on him. And I think that's the kind of thing that obviously it's not going to have a lot of an effect on him right now, but I think in the future, that's the kind of thing that will probably get through to him, because as we'll get to, that is the kind of thing that he greatly needs.
Yeah, and it's like one of the things that really stuck out to me about Kousuke when we realized it was the very specific way that he was brought up viewing that kind of vulnerability and those desires were like, he was born to be the heir, right? And when we meet him, we see that this is his goal. We assume that he's an ambitious, kind of career-driven person, that, this is at least to some degree something that he wants in his life, and he is chasing it. And then we learn through seeing more of Kousuke and getting his backstory and seeing some of the cognitive dissonance that he experiences, that that was never his goal. He was born and bred for that, where he is supposed to be an extension of Yui, and that's her goal. So he was never allowed to explore who he is, and he was told, if you want to get anywhere in this life, and if you want to be a part of this family in a meaningful way, if you want to be loved, if you want to specifically and explicitly be loved by your father, this is what you have to do. This is what our family is like. And she's constantly going this, like, we're not like other people, we're not like other families. And his world is validating that. Like, we don't get any indication that he has other family members that have kind of provided a conflicting view of the world to that for him. Like, the conflict to that is Noel. And that's why that hits him so hard. But even before Noel came in, he has this void where he has interests that he's trying to follow, and he has things that he wants to be, but it's all constantly getting overshadowed and clouded by this need to become successful in the way that his parents are telling him to, that he perceives is from both parents. And anything that isn't immediately validated is tossed out. Like, that's what happened to his music, where he was so proud of it and happy with it, and then it wasn't looked at as successful, and he didn't play piano again. And with all of that, like, focus on personal ambition and drive and becoming someone else, as well as that narrative of we're different than other families, even like we're better than other families. This is just how we are. This is how people of our status work. This is how the world is. He's made to feel guilty for wanting anything else. And like, he's not even allowed to explore that vulnerability within himself, which is how we get all of the, this is what I want. Nobody is going to take it from me. Like, this is what I've been working for, where he's always trying to convince himself of his own goals because he isn't comfortable or feels allowed to confront his own vulnerabilities because he never has been.
That scene where Shanae tells him that she doesn't want to continue working for them was such a telling moment for him, because, and I can't remember exactly what it is he says, but he basically tells her that we all have to do things that we're not comfortable with or that we don't love. He basically says that everybody has a job that we don't love, but we have to do it. And like, in that moment, he is talking about himself. And I know at the time that he said it, there were people who were calling it out for what it was, but there, at the same time, there are a lot of people who were very willing to gloss over it because they have that same sentiment that Kousuke does, that, yeah, that's life. We all have jobs that we don't love. And it's true. But the difference is, for Kousuke, he was never given the opportunity to even explore anything else. Yes, it's true that most people never, get to explore their dream job. They never get to do what they truly wanted to, whether it's because what they truly want is not the kind of job that you can make a living at, or because, they didn't have the skills for it, or you just have to take what you can. And sometimes you get stuck in a job and, you never leave that. But the point is, somebody like Kousuke was never given that opportunity. The way that Yui simultaneously isolated and commodified his father's love ensured that he was never going to question any of those things, because by telling him that we're so different from other people, this is just what's normal for us, we're not like those others, already he's not going to question those things. He's going to tell himself, you feel these things, but you're not like those people. So you just have to ignore it. And he does. He quiets it all down. And like you said, he's a sensitive, prickly person, you know? He is an emotionally turbulent person. And we see that a lot. You know, we may not see a lot of very positive emotions from him because, you know, pretty much the moment that Noel gets roofied on Shanae's behalf, it's like all downhill for Kousuke. Um, but he has such strong emotions, and you know some of that is partly because so much of his life is him lying to himself, and that kind of dissonance between you know his reality versus what is actual reality, his inability to cope with the actual reality crashing in on him. Um, Probably has a lot to do with, you know, the fact that yes, Yui has been drugging him for so long that it probably causes some of those mood swings. But I do think some of it is just that he himself is a mood swingy person. Do we want to, you know, chalk any of it to him being a Scorpio? He's a Scorpio, right? I can say that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say he does a lot of this thing where, like you said, he is an extremely sensitive and emotionally turbulent person, and I mean that is ultimately what Yui takes advantage of. Like she seems not all that happy that Kousuke is the heir that she got. Like she truthfully would have preferred someone a little more like Noel, as much as she might not want to admit that. Um, but she found a way to utilize that emotion because all of his ambition, all of that drive, none of it is true ambition like in the way that Yui has. It's all that emotional longing for love, and he believes that this is how to have it. And he's doing what I was thinking before is he's doing that like very like kind of typical Scorpio thing of trying to be vulnerable in a way that isn't vulnerable, where like, you know, having a phone call with Rand about how much his father actually loves him and what he wants from him, like shuts him down. You know, Kosuke.exe stops working. He just like he cannot handle it. But achieving Rand's affection through working at the company and rising the ranks and becoming a like homage essentially to his father, that feels safe to him because he's not allowed to be emotionally vulnerable, and that's a way to chase the all of those strong turbulent emotions that he's feeling and express them without actually doing so.
I, for one, feel perceived, but also, yeah, that's right. Like he wants to make his father proud of him in the only way that he perceives as acceptable. And you know, right, because there's a lot of things that Kosuke deems childish. And they're clearly things that he longs for, right? Because we see it with the way that he watches the way Shanae and Noel interact, and he calls them childish. And you know that there's a part of him that's longing to be able to joke around with somebody too. Like maybe he wouldn't joke around as much because, like we said, he is still a very prickly person, and we see what he's like with Hansuke. But it's one of those things too where it's like, you know, maybe if he had been allowed to let those walls down when he was younger, who could he have been, right? Um, but yeah, it's the way he was so proud of his music when he was younger, but when it was no longer a thing that could earn him his father's affection, he threw it aside, even though it was something that probably brought him so much personal joy and so much pride, probably. If it didn't earn him his father's love and affection, then it couldn't be something that mattered. And again, that commodification of Rand's love destroyed the way that he can perceive love, period. Because we also see it in his relationship with Noel. Because as much as he regards Noel as a burden and a hassle, you know, as something where he has to hassle himself to look after this troublesome brother who he never wanted, he wants nothing to do with. He holds that younger version of Noel who looked up to him and wanted to be his brother. Like he held him in his heart. Like there's like this sense of Kosuke who and how am I trying to say this? This is like, I've got this vision in my head and I don't know how to word this. But it's like there's a part of Kousuke who I think felt certain that Noel was always going to continue reaching for him. And when Noel stopped reaching for him, you know, it was a lot like with Noel and Shanae when the tables flipped and Shanae was the one chasing after Noel. Kousuke started doing the same thing, you know. He was the one going after Noel now. And he'll never admit that that's what he was doing and why he was doing it. But you know, he was definitely doing it because why is my brother not showing me that affection anymore? Because that was the only affection he was ever receiving. And, you know, like you said, that very Scorpio thing, like now that it's been taken away, why are you taking this away from me? Why do you no longer care about me? Even though, you know, like you gave him plenty of reasons to not care about you anymore.
And like with Noel, like when we bring in both that commodification of Rand's love and like the competition for it, where there's, you know, Kosuke's been told there is not enough to go around. Like there's barely enough for you as it is. But like especially not if there's another person involved. And like the way that he views all of this love as commodified, where like no one can possibly love him for just who he is. And then this little kid comes in who he is supposed to essentially like hate and be afraid of, and they're supposed to be competition and enemies, and like this kid just offers him all of the unconditional love and affection that he has never been able to have, and it's mixed in with all these negative emotions and insecurities and fears. And it's like we talk about a similar thing with Alyssa and Shanae in middle school, where like the one person who offered them that like genuine unconditional love and acceptance, it wasn't a safe place for them to receive it. And so it still ended up intertwined with all of this negativity, and they like still weren't able to have it. And for the brothers, like it results in this strong like both sense of envy for what each other has, and like feelings of guilt for the relationships that were lost, and like longing for what could have been. And it just creates such like an intricate dynamic between them when you put people in that position. And we see that Kosuke has based his entire life, like ever since he met Noel, based his entire life around that relationship and what it is and what it isn't, and who Noel is and isn't, and who Kosuke is and isn't. And he measures himself against that constantly. And like, I don't remember if we said it before on the pod or not. I think we have that. Like, that's his whole thing with Shanae too. Like, the reason why he's so focused on her and like wants to help her and be around her, and like why her part of why her opinions matter to her, because there's more to it as well, is because she reminds him of that little kid who offered him all that love and affection that Kosuke shut down and can no longer have, like that relationship that was broken, that he still wants. And that like he again like doesn't feel allowed to be vulnerable enough to confront those longings and emotions with.
And I think, especially for Kosuke and Noel, the worst part is that the fear was so manufactured. Kousuke himself never experienced, as far as we know yet, he never experienced a moment that confirmed why he should fear Noel. So much of it was fed to him through Yui. And, you know, it was partly that commodification of the love. It was that belief that Rand only has so much love to give. And if I'm not good enough, if I don't perform well, he's going to give it all away to somebody else who is more deserving than I am. But so much of that was fed to him by Yui, because she's the one who made him believe that in the first place. But she's also the one who made him even fear this existence of this other kid. And, you know, we talked about this in episode, I believe it was 7, when we talked about Yui and the fact that she hails from a family who probably, this is the way that they live. Family is not, you know, a safe community. Your siblings are your enemies, and they are potentially going to take everything that you have So you have to destroy them before they can do it to you. So, it's not that she raised Kousuke any differently than she was raised, very likely, but that doesn't change the impact that it had upon him. And it doesn't change the fact that Kousuke yearned for something that he had to deny himself. And yeah, we see him finally seeking that out in Shanae. And when we have that moment when they're at the arcade and like he looks at Shanae and actually sees little Noel, and it confirms the theory, because up until then it had been a theory that the whole reason that Kousuke was so nice to Shanae and why he treated her better than he tends to treat other people was because she reminded him of Noel, because she was his second chance, because having that confirmed was such a reeling moment for me, because because that whole getting to see his childhood too coming after that, and having the confirmations that all of his ambition, everything, all of these dreams, it was just all planted by Yui. There was nothing in his life at that point that he had been doing for himself. Nothing he had chosen had ever been for himself. I mean, like, I was going to say, except maybe sweets, but like, if, like, had she been drugging sweets and they, now have that effect on him that he eats them and they make him feel a little calm, like, there is nothing in his life that he has ever done that's for himself, except, I guess, being kind to Shanae, which is such a weird revelation to have. And it just, just to use that moment, it makes like the Kousuke and Shanae bond feel even more special to me, because again, like when I was in my like Kousuke hater era, like I never even wanted to see Kousuke and Shanae scenes, because it was like, he's such an asshole. He doesn't respect her boundaries. And that's true. He didn't. That's something that he needs to learn. And that's something that needed to be called out. And I still stand by that. But I also still stand by the fact that I think Shanae is a presence that he needed in his life. Like, his life is it's clearly already gone downhill, and it's going to continue to spiral like that. And I think Shanae is going to be I don't. I always like try hard not to say that, I don't want to make it sound like I think she's going to, like be his knight in shining armor, because I think there's a lot of work that Kousuke has to do for himself. But like we always say, I think Shanae is the light. I think she is going to be that hand that he needs to help himself back up, to, like help him see that there is something to him.
I was gonna say, like, it feels like he's like in the middle of the tsunami and she's an island, where like he's just like this kind of stable grounding point for him that he would drown without, like,
right.
And it's just there's such a specific dynamic that the two of them have, where like he's the only person that he perceives as not having any reason to want to be around him, and yet she still does. Like, the only other person that behaved that way for him, that he, in his perception, was Noel, but he couldn't let that be okay because of all of these insecurities and fears planted by Yui. Where with Shanae, it's like, clearly she like isn't pandering to him. She isn't gaining anything from knowing him. She doesn't have an ulterior motive. She doesn't have a need, but yet she still cares about him and is being around him. And that is just so incredibly important for him to have, because like he doesn't have that with Jace. Jace works for the company. He doesn't have that with Hansuke because he thinks that Hansuke is obligated to be with him because they're family. He doesn't have that with his college friends anymore because they're all gone. Like, he doesn't have that with Soshi, even though he very much indulges in hanging out with Soshi because it's kind of the closest thing he had to a friend for a long time. But he pays Soshi. and he pays Soshi to spy on Noel. Where and like neither of his parents love him unconditionally. Like it's just it's just he himself doesn't perceive anyone else as just genuinely being with him for who he is. And I think it very much confuses him why Shanae does. Like he doesn't seem to understand it. I don't think Shanae understands it either. Like she just feels a need to like not abandon this man. But like you said, like there's nothing else in his life that is like authentic and his and safe other than Shanae.
I think Shanae is very much what Noel and Kousuke could have been, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like that relationship, that very, I mean, obviously, like Noel and Kousuke could have been the us against the world kind of relationship, but I think Shanae can have that kind of almost family type relationship with him, because I think that's kind of how I see it. Like, not the obligation of family, obviously, but the way that, like you said, like even she doesn't quite understand it. It's like, you know, he's like that feral street cat that you find who's really mean because he's been hurt by people and you don't know why, but you want to, you know, try your hand at kind of, you know, taming him and helping him
Just
be
like
friendly, you know?
just like providing a safe space. And it's like I'm gonna point
Right.
this out because I remember when I said it the first time I like it, where like Shanae is the sun and is making plants grow around her. Where it's like it's just her like presence itself provides this like safety and growth possibility for these other people.
And I think something that I think was missed a lot when I Love You was regarded by a lot of people as a love triangle. And I think we've talked about this on the podcast, or at least here in the server a lot, is that romantic relationships are not the pinnacle of all relationships. And, you know, that means you can have a platonic relationship that is just as important as a platonic relationship. I think we were talking about this even with the fact that Minhyuk and Shanae are obviously platonic soulmates,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that Shanae and Noel are, you know, soulmates in every which way. I think Kousuke and Shanae have a very, very special bond. And, you know, I think people who shipped them obviously sensed that. You know, like people were saying, there is something about their interactions. They do have a special dynamic to them. People really like the way that they banter and they go back and forth. And, you know, I get it. Like, while that wasn't something that worked for me as a romantic pairing, because like I said, you know, he was trampling all over boundaries. It was the fact that, you know, like I see that rhythm. I do get why, you know, people are drawn to that. And I think the more that I came to care about Kousuke as a character and want to see that growth, the more I could start to see that he is such a broken and trampled person who never got to decide who he is, never got to explore who he wants to be, never got to, you know, there's nothing that he has ever done for himself because he wanted to, for the pure joy of doing it, except maybe during college.
And like he perceives that as a mistake, like a
Right,
wrong that he has to right because he lost so much time. You know, it was useless, it was futile, and he shouldn't. Like he currently in this moment is like, I should never have done that.
right.
And like that was
Um,
him. That was him as a person trying to come out because he finally felt safe to do so. And like it's just been like shoved back in the box and like stomped on for good measure.
and I strongly feel like Shanae will help eventually bring part of Fat Kosuke back. I know, like, if we want to be very realistic about it, and I don't like being realistic about it because it's sad, I know that there's a good chance that Kosuke will never entirely fully recover from this, because what do you do when you're at this point in your life and you have come to realize that everything that you believed in was a lie, that the mother that you believed loved you has lied to you every single day of your life, has manipulated you at every single turn, has been drugging you and, using that to further manipulate you, that everything that you've ever done that you thought was for the good of your family was part of her manipulative scheming plot. Like, where do you go from there? Like, obviously, I think with good, therapy, he's still young. Like, I'm not saying that he's completely doomed and hopeless, but it's going to be really hard. So I'm not saying that I think Shanae is going to be able to save him, because I fully acknowledge that there is a lot that he has to get through, that he has to face, and it's going to be really hard because he has lost so much. And, for Kousuke, he is in the what happens if you fail stage. Like that's part of the series, right? It's like, what are their needs? What are their goals? And what happens if they fail? This is Kousuke's fail zone. He has lost everything he was trying to go for. He wanted to be that perfect heir that he was supposed to be. He desperately wanted his father's love. And while technically he never lost that, he has always had it, it was never able to reach him. And the times that the times that Rand has tried to reach him, it couldn't. There's that buffer around him. He is in that place where he has now realized that everything that he's done that he thought was furthering him and getting him closer to his goal was only pushing him further and further away and alienating him. I think I worry that there's a part of Kousuke who feels like the reason Rand doesn't love him isn't because he wasn't good enough or because he wasn't successful enough, is that it's because he as a person just isn't good enough, Like, not that it has anything to do with his successes, but that way that he measures himself against Noel, who is so much like the version of Rand that his this young kid described to him, the funny man who told jokes and liked disgusting chocolate balls, the version of Rand that Kousuke always saw in Noel, Like, I think that's so much about what 212 is Kousuke realizing that maybe it's not that Dad never loved me because I haven't been good enough, because I haven't worked hard enough, because I haven't been successful enough. Maybe he just doesn't love me because I'm an unlovable person. Maybe I'm just that horrible of a human. And that's why he loves Noel. Because that's the other thing, right? Is like, even though he has always seen Noel as being the screw up kid, the one who messes up, the one who has never been good enough, he's the one who, in Kousuke's eyes, still gets Rand's attention, gets all of, he's the one. And like that, Kousuke is in the what happens if you fail zone, because he did. He's lost everything that he wanted, because the only things he wanted were the things that he was told to want. And the only things that he truly wanted for himself, his father's love, the brother that he couldn't truly let himself have and let himself want, has officially turned his back on him. And just like, where do you go from there?
And like, this is part of the mirroring with Kousuke and Alyssa, where like, I very, very much do think that they believe that who they are as people, isn't lovable, isn't pleasant,
absolutely.
isn't accepted. Like I said before, that they feel like they're allowed to exist in society, but they're not allowed to exist as themselves, and that like their authentic self is so ugly that nobody could love them. And so I think it's very right that he does believe that Rand doesn't love him because he, as a person, just isn't good enough for Rand's love. And this is something that Alyssa very much does too, where he believes that maybe, just maybe, if he becomes successful enough, it can make up for what a failure he is as a person. And that's so sad. Like, and the fact that it's not like, it's not just one person in his life that he's trying to make up the lost love of. He doesn't have it from anyone at all. Like, he doesn't feel loved by anybody, and he just so fundamentally feels that his personality is not good enough. And he's like, well, if I keep working and I work harder and I work harder and I work harder, you know, I'll get to a point maybe where it's at least kind of close to the real thing, and I'll make up for that failure of who I actually am with the successes of what I do. And that is so much of what pushes everyone away. And it's again that self-fulfilling prophecy that they have, where they were raised in a world that commodifies love. And when love is commodified, it's impossible to earn it that way. And anything that you do is just going to drive you further and further into that pit until, you've never been allowed to explore who you are as a person. You don't know who you are. All you know is that you think that you're not a lovable person, and that all of the efforts you've made that you were told are going to get you to a better place and to a place where you are able to be loved and accepted hasn't worked. And you're almost 30 years old, and you look back on the past 30 years that you spent on this earth and realize that you have absolutely nothing for yourself in that time, and try desperately to figure out where on earth you go from there.
And that's that thing about the phone call he has with Rand. Like it was a much needed conversation. And I'm using the word conversation loosely, obviously, because, it's mostly Rand overhearing this. But it really sold how deeply Kousuke believes that, like, not just that he's unlovable, but that he is undeserving of the love. Because even when Rand tells him how much he cares, he can't believe it. He can't accept it because he thinks that he isn't lovable, that he doesn't deserve to love or be loved. And so that if Rand is telling him that he loves him, it can't be true because clearly he's not good enough for it. Clearly he doesn't deserve it. So why would Rand be telling him this? And the way it just shuts him down, the way, like that spiral that follows, and how, when he shows up at the Parks house, he is so much nastier than he usually is. He's so much more on edge. That call, shakes him up so much. And I think that's, entirely what leads to that confrontation with Noel too, because obviously, like for him, it's easier to pin that blame because while deep down, I think, yes, he believes he is so unlovable that his father can't possibly love him despite the successes. It has to be Noel's fault, right? Because, what else, how else can he explain it? And we see that a lot with the way that Kousuke shifts responsibility, even like, like if Rand tells him directly, I don't want you babysitting Noel, in his mind, he's still sitting here going, Father is so mad at me because I didn't look after you. Like he has to make things make sense because why else does Father not love me? There has to be a reason. And it's like you said, like when you commodify love, you're never going to be able to earn it. And I think that goes very hand in hand with his relationship with Hansuke because, right, I think he views Hansuke as obligate love. I don't think he thinks Hansuke really loves and cares about him, even though we've seen that he is probably the only character who truly loves and cares about Kousuke and cares about his well-being and wants to see any good from him. Like he is the only one who is trying to get Yujing to give him a second chance, who wants everyone else to give him a second chance. And he can't even see that he has Hansuke's unconditional love. And like it is truly unconditional coming from Hansuke. And because he feels like it's obligate love, or else he feels he hasn't earned that love. He can't even accept that this is true unconditional love because, family, obviously, obligation,
And Hansuke has other friends who are better than Kousuke. Why should Hansuke love him? And like part of the thing, like you were saying with Noel, is like I get from the way that he talks about Noel, I get the impression that part of it is like, and part of the reason why he keeps kind of throwing and shifting the blame back at Noel
is he has had this impression throughout his entire life that he is not good enough to be loved by Rand, but there's a double kind of thing of Noel is like the shining beacon of what he thinks that his father should love and should want, and once Rand has seen that, how could there possibly be room for him to even entertain loving someone like Kousuke? Where maybe if Noel had never existed and Rand had never met Noel, he wouldn't have known better enough to realize that Kousuke wasn't good enough.
If Daddy didn't know what a good son looks like, then I could be the good son.
Yes.
That's horrible.
But I think that's
I agree.
And so much of why he keeps shifting and throwing blame back at Noel, because he does perceive the entrance of Noel as being what like nailed the coffin shut for him not to be able to have Ren's love, because he really does feel like Noel took it from him, not because Kousuke had it before and lost it, but because any chance at Kousuke being good enough is gone.
And the irony to me is the fact that all Noel wanted was, to be a little team, them against the world. He didn't want Rand's. I know, like he didn't even want Rand's love. Like it was just like straight up, fuck this man. If he wants to be like this, screw that. My mom was crazy. I don't know what she saw in this man, but that version of that man must not have existed. Like he must have been a dream. And he, like, I think the thing that gets to me so much about them is the fact that Noel did see that part of Kousuke, right? Like he could see the vulnerable parts of Kousuke that he tried so hard to hide away. He, like he kept saying that he wanted Kousuke to stop trying so hard to earn Rand's favor and to just stop,
It's a shame that your drive and talents are being wasted on other people's ambitions.
Right. And just, I have words and they're not coming right now. It's just, right. Like, he couldn't, he obviously doesn't understand. And obviously, there's so much he does not know about how Kousuke was literally cultivated, right? And obviously I feel like that's going to come in due time. I still feel strongly that there will come a day when Kousuke and Noel can at least make peace, where he will learn the things that Kousuke went through, and that Noel, was not the only one who was abused by Yui, that there is a whole web of this going on. And I think at that time it will help him understand better why Kousuke was never able to be that brother he wanted him to be, and why he couldn't let go of those fears, and why they controlled him so greatly. Because that's very much the same thing for Noel, right? He too is so greatly controlled by his fears. That's literally the whole thing that he has going with Shanae right now, why he's pushing her away. He's so controlled by his fears.
And I mean, like, with Kousuke's fears, he sacrificed his entire identity. Like he threw it away. Like didn't even look at it, just like shoved it in a box and trampled it. If there was even anything in the box to begin with, because he didn't have time to put anything in it. Where Noel, Noel, because of his fears, created a whole new identity to hide the authentic one. Like they both worked their entire lives around their fears.
Right. And I do feel like once Noel learns those things, I think that will help a lot. I mean, I still think Shanae obviously is going to have a role as a bridge, but I think that will help a lot, because again, I think Kousuke is going to need people reaching out to him rather than him reaching out to others. I think we're going to continue to see this self-deprecation just spiral out further, because it's not just that he was not a good enough son, it's that he's never been a good enough person, that, you know, when he loses everything, you know, what does he have left? Nothing. There's nothing that he's good enough for. And there's going to come a point where he's going to think that there's no reason that people even have to continue to come to him, right? Like, we know Hansuke won't give up on him, fortunately, but I think I think people going to Kousuke is going to be a very important thing, just because I think one of the things he needs is a sense of validation, right?
Mm-hmm.
He needs people who can reinforce that, you know, yeah, you've kind of sucked, it's true, but people aren't static. We are capable of changing, you know, like, you know, by the time we get through the time skip, he's going to be almost 30 or something, right?
Yeah.
But like, you 30 is still so young, right? Like, there's so much that you can still change about your life. And obviously, when you're Kousuke, it's a different thing when, you know, like, you've spent your whole life dedicated for one thing. But the point is, I think he's going to need validation of, you know, people who are willing to be like, you know what, I know that you kind of suck, but I still want to be your friend. And like we've said, that's kind of Shanae, who, you know, doesn't want anything in return. That, you know, Hansuke is still going to be there. And I like to hope that at some point in time, he's going to realize that Hansuke has loved him all along. And that is one of the relationships that he has wanted, you know? Is he an obnoxious family member? Yes, but that's your obnoxious family member. You know, Noel too would have been an obnoxious brother, okay? It's what you would have wanted, Kousuke.
And it's like, with where Kousuke is going to be at the time skip and towards the end of the series, like, and I mean, Noel said this, that like, Kousuke, as he is right now, he is nothing without his family name, because he hasn't discovered who he is at all. He hasn't let himself be anything other than his family name. He's been working so hard at that his whole life, and he is about to fail at that. You know, he has been trying to succeed as Kousuke Hirahara and rise to the top and like be accepted because of where he falls in the ranks, and that not only doesn't fulfill his deep down emotional needs that he's so afraid of admitting are what he needs and wants, but he's spiraling, and he is not going to be able to keep up with where he was, and not going to be able to succeed as Kousuke Hirahara, at least on the trajectory that he's currently going on. And so when Kousuke Hirahara falls, he has to figure out who is Kousuke. And that's where he is currently failing at who is Kousuke. But I know we've talked before about feeling like where he's going to go at the end, and the way that he is going to kind of break the bonds that bind him is he's going to realize that people did love him, and that there was something in him that these people saw, that Noel saw all those years ago, that Hansuke sees, that Shanae saw and stayed for. And he's going to start nurturing that and find out who or at least start to find out who he is as a person, and feel validated and accepted and loved in who he is as a person.
I am personally a big fan, as I know you are, of Kousuke returning to music. Especially because it was something very specific Noel said before, you know, he demanded that he punch him.
He said
um,
he said that Kousuke was always good at a lot of things. And he specifically pointed out that Kousuke was really good at the piano, and he loved hearing him play. And he was like, "It's such a shame that you don't play anymore. I'd love to hear it again one day."
And that is what specifically makes me want Kousuke to return to the piano. It feels like it would be such a nice full circle moment, and especially it would be a nice kind of, I guess, invitation for Kousuke towards Noel, kind of like, I know we can't have that full relationship, that's all gone, but maybe we can start over like this. Because, or go on.
I was gonna say, I really feel like the music brings it full circle, especially because we're so pointedly shown in his flashbacks of 212 how proud he was to show Rand the piano songs that he had been working on to play Erklig for him. And, Rand says, "I'm sorry, I'm busy right now, maybe later." And Kousuke throws that sheet music, and we don't see any indication of Kousuke playing the piano again. But, just those few chapters prior, we have Noel saying that and saying, "You used to play and I loved to hear it, and I wish you hadn't stopped. I wish you had kept up with it, and I wish I could see you do it again, but right now you're robot Kousuke." And so it really feels like that, like, dual kind of imagery of Kousuke being so connected to and proud of something and throwing it away because in his perception Rand didn't care for it, and Noel saying that it's something that he appreciated and admired about Kousuke, coming full circle back in the end with Kousuke repairing the hole in himself and the hole in his relationships.
Right. Like Kousuke doing it for the joy of it, for himself. And I guess in this case, he might be doing it a little bit for Noel. And I guess, in this case, it doesn't hurt because, as much as we're talking about how Kousuke needs to discover who he is for himself, external validation is not a bad thing. Framing yourself around external validation is the bad thing. Deciding that you want to play the piano again because somebody that you admire and you actually want to build a healthy relationship with told you that he'd like to hear you play again, that's a good thing. And if in playing the piano again, you rediscover that you actually love this, that you have a passion for it, that, who knows, maybe that was one of the few things that brought Kousuke pure unbridled joy, like actual joy, not manufactured. I eat delicious desserts for all of my meals because I've got a Pavlovian response to eating sweet things, like something that he felt good about. And I think this is very similar to Alyssa too, where it's like, this is something that he felt proud of. Like Kousuke has never voiced this in the way that Alyssa has, but as they are mirrors, we can assume that maybe this is a very similar thing in which, he tells us that what matters is his career and being good at this. But that we know that he doesn't love that. So it's safe to assume that the love that he has for composition and playing the piano and being able to make music, something that's like, so like, because especially, like he does finances, like numbers are something so concrete compared to music that is so much more on the creative side, and how they're very often considered two very opposite things, right? And the freedom of being able to immerse yourself in something that is so creative and freeing, and being able to just immerse yourself in that. I want that for him so badly, and I want that for him and Noel.
And a big thing with music, and this is one of like the big hinges of music therapy, is that music is a way to connect people. And so for Kousuke to take this thing that we very much perceive as being such a genuine joy for him, and such a genuine way that he, again, like bears his soul without bearing his soul, and play again, and especially if he does play for other people or with other people, like whether he's playing it because he was kind of inspired by them to play, or he's playing in a room like with them there, it bridges that gap between people in an authentic way. To be able to connect with people in an authentic way like that through such an authentic and human and creative medium, it feels like it would be so meaningful within Kosuke's story for this man who has always wanted so badly to connect to other people and felt like he never could and would never be able to, and that he had to throw the few things that he found joy in and had his own identity with away in order to be loved. For him to reclaim something that truly brings him joy and use it as a means to connect to other people, especially if that's Noel, it feels so meaningful to me.
It does. And I think it's, for a lot of people, it's really, really difficult to learn how to express yourself. And, the older you get, the more set in your ways you become, right? And, like you were saying, that very Scorpio nature of, like vulnerable, but pretend it's not. I feel like music is that perfect way, because he may not ever know the right words to say things. He may not ever figure out how to be vulnerable in a way that exposes himself in a way that others, like, Noel and Shanae, can do. But if music is a way that he can do it, then that's better than nothing, right?
As a music therapist, it is so much better. And
Right,
sometimes it's better than expressing yourself with normie people words.
right.
Support your local music therapist.
Not sponsored yet. I it's funny because, like, we started this by expressing how much I absolutely could not stand Kosuke back in the day, but I mean it when I say he has absolutely become one of my favorite characters. And part of it is very much because I feel like he's a character that you have to defend a lot, just because there's a lot of nuance to him. But a lot of it is also this kind of stuff, right? It's the fact that he's this very sensitive person who has no means of expressing his vulnerabilities, who has had to close so much of himself off and has no channels of expression. And he really has nobody. He doesn't feel his father's love. The only parent that he thought truly loved him, he has come to realize, has never really loved him. Truly nobody is the only person who ever loved him. And now even Noel has turned his back on him. Again, I reiterate, I think that is the importance of Shanae staying. I'm saying staying loosely because I do think we're going to see her take Yui's offer and go to college first and then return as his assistant. But, I do wonder if they will stay in contact of some kind. I don't anticipate Kosuke being very responsive, or at least if he is, it will be like very obligate, pretending everything's normal, just kind of coasting by, as I think he'll probably be doing soon.
And I mean, that's part of that, like, it's going to get worse for him before it gets better. Like,
Right.
he is having his entire life dismantled before him. He is realizing not only all of the harm that's been done to him, but the way that the harm that's been done to him has led him to harm other people. And, like, he's going to be going through it. And I don't think Shanae will ever turn her back on him, but she has to live her own life too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I agree, it's more so that she's going to come back. Like, she's not going to turn her back on him, and she's going to come back for him, and that ultimately is her staying for him.
Right. And I'd like to reiterate too, like, romantic relationships are not the only important relationships, and platonic relationships can and very often are just as important. I think that Shanae being situated between the two brothers is something that was very cleverly written, not because it was meant to be a love triangle, but because Shanae bridging these two people who both carry so much raw hurt and pain, who, are at this point where they can't face each other anymore. Like, Noel has literally turned his back on him, and Kousuke literally, he tried and he could not face Noel. He wanted to go back and never got the chance, but he can't face him because of the things he's done. And like you said, I think Kousuke coming to reckon with the things that he has done under the belief that he was doing them for good reasons is, that's definitely going to be part of that it gets worse process in terms of how can I possibly think that I deserve any kind of relationship with people when I'm this kind of monster? And that's where Shanae comes in. And like you said, the power of staying, the power of being somebody who looks at you and sees you at your worst and still sees something good in you. And, I think that was something very similar that Kousuke did with her. That night when he was there in the hospital with her, I don't think he made all of the right choices when he sent Noel away. He did believe he was doing the right thing, and he was trying. Like, I will give him that much. Like, he was trying to be the person that she needed at that time. It's clear that, right, that's the thing. It is so clear that Kousuke wants to be a good person. That is why that episode, and I can't remember the number, but the revelation about the day that Noel came to him and the girl that we assume is Manli's sister, like, why that hurts so much is because it's clear Kousuke feels remorse. He feels so much guilt. He is, like, I know, like, we've talked about that before, and I just keep coming back to that point, is Kousuke is not a bad person, because, like, a bad character, a bad person is somebody who hurts people and they don't care. Yui falls into that box because she does not care who she hurts. In fact, she's at that point of she is taking pleasure in the people that she hurts. Kousuke is not Yui. He's he may have adopted a lot of her mannerisms, but that is the same way that we adopt our parents' mannerisms, He is not his mother. He cares so much that he hurt people. He cares so much that he turned away somebody who loved him because of his own fears and insecurities, that somebody needed him so desperately, and he was so callous and cruel. And that is how Kousuke wants to be a good person. He wants to be friends to people. He wants to be family to people. He just doesn't know how. He doesn't have the skills. He doesn't have the home training. He doesn't have the breeding. He doesn't have it, but he can learn it.
He's so caught in the middle right now because Yui is trying to make him into Yui. Like, her thing is that she's upset that he is, like, that he does want to be a good person. He wants to be liked because that's not what she needs.
Right,
she wants to be more like her. And meanwhile, everyone else, like, needs Kousuke to be that, like, wanting to do good, wanting to connect person that he deep down is. So he's caught in this middle ground where to be the person who is accepted and loved by the woman who has raised him, because realistically no one else raised Kousuke. I mean, Yui made sure of that. She made sure that she's the person who got to raise Kousuke. That the way that she is training him to be and wants him to be and is communicating to him that he should be, that is the right good person way to be, is at such odds with how he actually feels and the way that he needs to connect with other people and the like good person that he is and wants to be. And that creates so much of that turmoil and that dissonance and so many of the issues in his life where he can't be either one in the state that he is. And so he's failing at both of them, and while he's trying so hard to be both of them.
I'm going to wrap him up in a weighted blanket, and turn off the lights. And I'm going to bring him several bottles of water and maybe some saltine crackers, because I don't know what else he should be eating right now, but something dry.
And not sweet.
Definitely not sweet. I think that covers our poor wet cat right now.
I think so too. He's just a sensitive, prickly little boy who never learned how love works.
And that's the saddest thing about it. Like, just like watching love operate around you with no real understanding of why it operates the way it does, and more importantly, why you don't get any of it. Like, I always go back to that scene where, like Kousuke first met Noel and Nessa, and when he was watching Nessa blow raspberries on Noel's face, and he turns to his own mother and looks up at her, and she's just this looming figure with no face, and that tells us everything about the dynamics. He never had that nurturing maternal relationship. He tries, we've seen as a child that he wanted some kind of nurturing relationship, but he just never received it. Kousuke has yearned for love and acceptance his entire life. And the few times that he ever had it, he either threw it away or, well, no, I guess he threw it away all times, because even in college, after he returned to his family, he threw it away. So
It's the lack of feeling of safety. And that's the thing with this mirrored pair, with Kousuke and Alyssa, where both of them were raised to believe that love is synonymous with what you do, not who you are, and that who you are is not good enough to be loved. And when they are faced with the unconditional love that they need, something about it has always been unsafe, and that leads them to throw it away, where they just don't feel like they're allowed to keep it.
right. And right, like you said, that is the mirrored element about them, I think. I mean, that, and the fact that so much of their conflict is internal rather than the more external issues that we see in Noel and Shanae. But yeah, I think for these two, it's, yeah, like you said, it's the safety. It's the fact that the both of them have been seeking out safety, and they never find it, everywhere they go. It's fleeting.
There's always something in the way.
Right. And that is the perfect transition to our favorite tragedy, Alyssa.
Where to start? It's like part of it is, so much of it aligns with what we've been talking about with Kousuke. I'm like, where do we dive in for her?
Right. Especially too, because Alyssa is, so much of her story is speculation, in the sense that we've seen just enough to assume that it lines up very similar to Kousuke, right? We were talking earlier about how Alyssa comes from a very similar socioeconomic status as Kousuke. Like, they're not nearly as high up the rung as the Hiroharas are, but they certainly are in some kind of affluent social circle, right? I definitely get the sense that her parents might be, or at least once were, socialites. Her mom kind of like has that thing about her. And I do know that we've kind of like speculated, are the Chos wealthy? Did they have wealth and they lost it? Because, they had a lot of money to be taking Alyssa to all of these special exhibitions and museums and stuff. But, and this is something that's heavily speculated on, because we don't really have anything to actually back this up. It's more of is it possible that after the middle school incident, they had to pay off the school to keep things quiet, and, maybe they took an economic hit to that, And that's partly why it's really important for Alyssa to maintain her career, especially with Meg having switched careers so much. And therefore, she's been in school a lot longer than kids her age usually would be. And therefore, they've had to pay more money for school, etc., etc.
And her father does say in her flashback that, like, he's working longer hours and they're strapped for cash. And, like, that's why it's disrespectful for the girls to not be working and their mother to not, have everything prepped and ready because money is tight right now. And that's not the impression that we got from the way they were previously living. So it does
Right.
seem like something financially happened. Where, like, they're obviously, they're not poor like Shanae, but that their financial status changed. That their lifestyle might not have changed, but their financial
Right. Right. And rather than try to match their, current status, they're trying to maintain the status with, what they currently have. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But at any rate, we do know that she comes from a, more affluent family than, Shanae did. Where was I going with that? I had a point and I lost it already. I think I was just getting at the fact that, like, Alyssa is, she is set up to be very successful, right? Like, we see that from Shanae visiting her, that, Shanae even wonders, like, if I had what Alyssa had, would I be happier? Would I be more content? Alyssa has everything. And she even has overbearing parents who care too much. And, for somebody like Shanae, who has a father who is never around because he's working so much, whose mother left when she was so young that she, barely has any memories of her, to have parents who, love you so much that they're always in your business kind of feels like oh, cry me a river about it, right? But obviously for somebody like Alyssa, who has secrets that your parents might not love about you, it's a much bigger deal. Alyssa, like Kousuke, it feels like she's never been allowed to be who she wants either, but kind of in a different way. Because
I've this is something that I've said before,
go
where
ahead.
Kousuke was given a person to be the moment that he was born and wasn't allowed to find who he was because he was told that he has to be that person in order to be loved. Whereas for Alyssa, we get the impression that she knew exactly who she was and what she wanted to be. That's the whole thing with her wall. That's the whole thing with her being angry at the other girls in middle school. That's the whole thing with, like, she had such a strong personality. She had such strong interests, but she didn't receive love for any of it. Where
Right.
all of those elements of her personality, it was consistently communicated to her that, like, those aren't okay. Society doesn't want you to be that. You're not going to receive love for being that. And so instead, she's trying to chase what elements she can morph herself into to be loved because she's been promised that love sits on the other end.
Right. Because I was thinking about how, she was talking to Shanae about how, like, every time she shows interest in anything, her parents just, like, instantly swarm it, right? How, like, to me, it was showing that, like, she, like you said, she has ideas about who she wants to be. It's just, she doesn't quite get to explore it either, because it's like the moment she shows interest, they just, like, they act like, okay, this is who you are now, let's do this. She shows interest in dance one time and now she's in dance lessons. Does she love it? No. But does she have to keep doing it? Apparently so. And like you said, it's like you're saying, it feels like what they're saying is, this is more acceptable, this is a better thing, so we want you to pursue this instead. And I think what that earlier point I was getting at is how, like, at, a surface level, Alyssa has everything, in that sense that she has money, she has family who gives her essentially everything she wants, you would think that, she has no reason to be unhappy and to not feel safe and secure. But, that is exactly, I think, the crux of Alyssa's story, is that people look at her only on that surface level. They see, they see these superficial aspects of her, or they see elements about her that they see either in their own lives or in people who have hurt them or in what they wish that they had. And they apply that to with their own biases, and therefore they just skim the surface and go, yeah, I don't understand why she's like that.
And so much of Alyssa is just the quest to be able to be freely your authentic self. Where similar to Kousuke, she's never been put in a position where she believes that who she actually is allowed to happen and is lovable and is allowed to be free for herself. Solidaritea just said her love and treatment was conditional based on her compliance with the norms her father established and the hunt to find something gifted about her. So people using her to their own wants is something that she's so experienced with. Where that is the trajectory that she follows, because she is just under this impression that that is the only value she has as a person. That is all that she is good for, that's all that she's allowed to do. But she wants so badly to be able to express those parts of herself that she knows she is. She wants to be able to be her own person and it be allowed. And that's why she's searching so hard and presenting all of these shallow means, because she's searching for that freedom in places where it can't be found.
And that is absolutely how and why she develops a crush on Shanae. Because Shanae is that she's the only person who looks at Alyssa and sees her for who she truly is. And not only sees her for who she truly is, but likes her so much for who she is. She lavishes her with praises, and they're sincere praises. It's not the same way that the popular kids praise her. She's not just saying things to make her like her. She's not trying to buy off her affection or anything like that. Shanae is so sincere about the way that she sees Alyssa. We watch the way that Alyssa's responses to Shanae go from being initially flustered to becoming those full-on blushes. It is an actual progression, right? It starts out oh wow, this kid is so nice. She's so sincere. Wow, this is a lot. And then go on.
She's actually even a little bit combative at first. Basically,
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't even believe it.
Right. And Shanae is just so earnest about it that, I think it's very much, I guess in a way, it's probably opposite for Kousuke, where Shanae makes Alyssa start to believe it, or at least want to believe it, right? That was the ultimate issue that Alyssa had in middle school. She desperately wanted to find the way to have her cake and eat it too. She was so certain that if she could get these girls to like her, then she could get them to like Shanae too. Because if they like her and she likes Shanae, then surely that means they're going to like Shanae too. She was so certain she could have it all. And that was her master plan. And I feel like a lot of readers never picked up on this. They really thought that Alyssa's initial actual intention was to ditch Shanae. But initially, she planned to hard carry them both up, because Shanae was the person who saw Alyssa for who she was. And I think she was so afraid to lose that. She wanted to keep that. When Shanae called her out on her hot and coldness, when she, was calling Alyssa out on the way that she went back and forth, she would get so upset about it. She did not like Shanae seeing her that way. She did not want to lose that relationship.
She cared so much. And I don't remember the exact line, but Solidaritea just said, Alyssa said something to the effect of she promised Shanae she wouldn't leave her behind even as she was starting to do so, but it was said in an affirmative way, not a lying way. Where like Alyssa's fatal flaw is really that she thinks that it can all work out, and that the only thing she has to sacrifice is herself.
Right.
And that's not the case. And we talk a lot about how Alyssa is constantly trying to find an option that will work for everyone and create the least waves. And in her mind, that is what that option is. It is sacrificing herself so that everything will turn out okay. But it never does because, as we've learned from her and Kousuke, not being your authentic self isn't a viable option. It's never going to end well. It's never going to make everyone happy. But also, sometimes you do have to make choices and you have to let go of something in order to have something else. And a lot of people thought that's what she did with Shanae, where, she let go of Shanae in order to have popularity and have that social status and security. But what happened is she was trying so hard to grab it all, and then, like, it was almost as if she was set on fire, and like Shanae had an emergency exit next to her and Alyssa had to run across the room to get out. Like, that feels like the emotional situation that Alyssa thought that she was in when everything finally did start to like really go down and there was no turning back, and like the bullying ramped up for both of them and the lesbian allegations and rumors started around both of them, and she was faced with this. Again, she is a person with secrets that she doesn't want to be found out, and that she especially doesn't want her family to find out. And it was like, we can't save ourselves on the same pathway anymore, and I see that now. And you can go that way and you'll be okay, and I have to dart this way because that's the only way that I can make it out of this.
Right. I think it was up until everything blew up. Like, Alyssa was so certain that she was going to be able to pull this off. And it was only when, Shanae did not go according to plan, when, she was a wild card. She did not account for the way that Shanae would respond to finding out that somebody had stolen their project before Alyssa ever had a chance to tell her. And, frankly, Shanae would never have taken that well in the first place. But, Alyssa was not aware of that. But again, it was only at that point where Alyssa felt like she was backed into a corner that she made a final decision. And again, I think that was something that a lot of readers missed, because up until that point, Alyssa was determined. I don't think she had any intentions of throwing Shanae away until the point where this, like, if we view things as a scale, at that point the scales were off. And at that point, yes, that was where Alyssa was like, okay, I have to jump ship, unfortunately.
Like,
And right.
something.
Oh, go on.
Oh, this is something that I feel like is really important to look when we're looking at when Alyssa jumped ship and when she left Shanae behind. And this just came up in the chat where, like, she starts to notice this developing and budding relationship between Shanae and Minhyuk. And like, obviously it's very genuine and it's very close, and he is someone who can protect her and care about her and has this popularity and status that Alyssa perceives as being safety. And he honestly potentially, I hadn't thought about it in this particular way before, and this isn't the route that I brought it up through, but she potentially perceived this even as being like, Minhyuk can complete the plan in a way for Shanae, possibly. Where like he already has the status, he doesn't have to work his way in to bring Shanae up. It's also possible that that didn't cross her mind, but that's just something that crossed my mind while I was just saying. But either way, she sees that Shanae has someone. Shanae won't be completely alone. She won't be, completely falling down the well by herself. Like, she has that emergency exit. Like, maybe it doesn't lead to the best place, but she'll be able to get out of the fire. Whereas if Alyssa doesn't dart left, she's going to get consumed. Like there is no, at least she perceives there is no other way out for her. And so she starts talking, she talks about Minhyuk always with this air of jealousy because she has a crush on Shanae and they're in middle
And she
school.
is jealous. She doesn't
Yeah.
have any other friend. Like, even when you remove her crush from the equation, she doesn't have any other friend. Like,
Yeah.
Shanae is her only friend. And she sees Shanae forming this really sincere friendship with somebody. And, like, what if Shanae does like this boy? What if Shanae is a girl who she likes and she likes this boy,
Right. And it does seem like
Like,
that is absolutely something that was crossing her mind. So she always talks about Minhyuk with this air of jealousy, but behind that there's a reason for that jealousy, and that reason is that she can tell that that relationship is genuine, which is why she essentially feels comfortable leaving Shanae in the hands of Minhyuk. And she literally says when she's leaving on that red background, like, you'll be okay, but I'm not as strong as you. And like that's part of it, where Shanae won't be alone, but Alyssa would.
And I think another really interesting parallel to Kousuke is that, in Alyssa's eyes, I think she was scared that she was losing Shanae, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it started out that it was the two of them, new girls in this school, kind of them against this world, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out how do they find their place in this school.
Team
Alyssa has this
Atsu.
plan, right? Alyssa has this plan of how she's going to pull them up. And now suddenly Shanae has this other friend and she's hanging out with him. And like the irony is, of course, that like Alyssa is hanging out with these other girls who kind of like really snotty about Shanae. And again, like it's justified in Alyssa's mind because she has a plan. She's working on this. She knows what she's doing. But like there's it's that miscommunication happening because Shanae doesn't know what she's doing. In fact, in Shanae's eyes, she looks like she's going back and forth. Like
Yeah, hot and
Shanae's
cold.
the one, right? Shanae's the one who feels no security towards her. And, Alyssa's the one who feels like she's losing Shanae. And it feels very much like Kousuke feeling like he cannot share his father with Noel. Like, she cannot share Shanae with Minhyuk. Like, Shanae has to
Yeah.
pick him or me, which one? And like, I'm pretty sure she basically said that. Like,
Yeah, because Alyssa isn't lovable. How can Shanae possibly have enough love for both of them if it's already a miracle that Shanae accepts and loves her as it is?
and it's Minhyuk who is so popular, who everybody loves. Like he's just the cool kid. How is Shanae, who looks at her with the shiniest eyes and thinks that she's just so cool, ever going to look at her and still see her as someone cool now that she is next to someone who is probably like the coolest kid in school? And it's just when you again, like when you start to look at it for what it really is, when you start to compare those mirrors, when you start to look at Alyssa's story for what she's really seeking, that it's not that she wants attention, that it's not that she just wants to indiscriminately be liked, that what she really wants is that security, that she wants to feel loved, that she wants to feel secure and comfortable. That's what she's really searching for. And when she felt that she's losing Shanae to somebody who is so much cooler than her, because she feels like because right, it's like not only does she feel like she's unlovable, but she has a secret. Because that's that other thing about what's going on. It's like we've got two different storylines happening at the same time, because it's not just that they're both being bullied because of what's happening with the project that was stolen, but Alyssa has another little side case of bullying going on that she's not telling Shanae about. And like this heavily cycles back to how much she likes Shanae and how much she wants to believe that she is the person that Shanae sees her as. Because Shanae sees her as someone who's so cool and so smart and somebody who is just like this really great person. And if Shanae knew who she really was, could she actually like her that much? And I feel like Alyssa must come from a homophobic home, because I feel like how else do you develop that kind of fear if it's not already deeply rooted in your home, right? Especially because she's
That's
homeschooled. Like where else did she develop this fear that like I can't have anybody know? The teachers can't find out because the teachers are going to tell my parents, and then they're going to ask questions, and nobody will like the answers. She says that she doesn't want anybody to know, not even Shanae, because she is so scared that not even Shanae, who is the one person she knows who likes her for who she truly is, would not be able to like her for who she really, really, truly is.
And like Alyssa, one of the things that's really important about her character is that she comes from an abusive home, both a
Right.
verbally and physically abusive home with extremely high expectations, and whose parents' entire hopes are pinned on her. Where like she is supposed to make up for their oldest, she's supposed to be the trophy daughter to make up for their oldest child being a failure. And like anything that she does wrong in their eyes is punishable, and wrong is who she is. Like you said, it feels like she has to come from a homophobic home, or at the very least that she believes she comes from a homophobic home, because she is just under this impression that it's not okay, and that if people find out, like it's not just going to be that they think it's weird or odd, or that they don't support her or whatever. Like they are going to ostracize her, they are going to cast her out, they are going to bully her as they have already been bullying her. Like her parents will like do their worst essentially, and like that is why it's so much not an option for her. And that is why like her doing anything like quote unquote wrong is not an option for her, because she's never been allowed to make a mistake and recover from it. It's always been like a catastrophic world ending event, even when the mistakes that she was making most likely weren't even mistakes.
And I think that oh god, I just lost my train of thought. Holy crap. What was I gonna say? I think that really falls into how I lost my thought. Go on.
I think it's also like this ties in really strongly to, again, her quest for freedom, because her quest for freedom is really what is
Yes.
driving all of her character goals. Where like, because of the fact that she's never been allowed to make mistakes, she's never been allowed to be who she is, she's never been allowed to stray from the mold. Like she has always had to cater to these expectations of other people, and she views people in higher like positions of social power as having more freedom to be themselves, because if the popular girl does something that people think is weird or wrong, you know like how is Shanae going to tell Sarah Lee that Sarah Lee's not allowed to do something weird? It works the other way around, right? Where like, even if these people don't actually love her, even if because I think she does think that that's impossible. I think that she thinks that she's not going to be able to get there. Like she has an even worse self-image than Kousuke does, from what I can tell. Where like she just so deeply and thoroughly and genuinely believes that she is ugly and it is impossible for anyone to love her. Where like, I don't even think that she thinks unconditional love is actually on the docket. Like that's ultimately what she wants, but I don't think that she thinks that she can get there. And so the next best thing is to just gain enough social status and power to be able to be free, to the point where she can just act as who she is and no one can say a thing to her, because she has climbed up the social ladder, where it's not about fame, it's not about attention, it's not about prestige, it's not about making herself above other people. It's about putting herself in a place of safety to where people can't ostracize her anymore.
And that's what middle school is for her initially. That is her first escape. She wants to get away from her family. They're overbearing. They're always pushing their expectations on her. She has no friends her age. Like, at that point in her life, there's nothing that she's really gotten to do for herself without, her parents supervising. Like,
She
have they
begged.
Right. Like, has she been able to explore all of the interests that she's ever had? Yeah, sure. But when everything that you ever want to do comes at the cost of your parents breathing down your neck and being so overbearing, of course she was yearning to break free. And, even though she had never had friends her own age, she knew enough to know that like, you don't want to be ostracized. You don't want to be cast out. And again, I say this a lot, but like, I'm going to be real and straight here, but a lot of kids yearn to fit in. Even if you don't want to be the popular kid, you want to fit in. You don't want to be ostracized. Nobody like enjoys being the kid who gets bullied, right? Like Alyssa's quest to fit in and to blend in and to eventually infiltrate the popular group is not an inherently evil character trait, because she is that is a very human trait. She wanted to fit in. She wanted the human experience of being able to have friends, but also because she carries with her a secret that she thinks makes her so disgusting and wrong. She needs more than ever to blend in so that she can be normal, so that no one will think that there's anything wrong with her. Because like you said, Elle, let's be honest, Alyssa was very obvious. And that's the thing. I do think it's very likely that the rumors could have started because Alyssa was, when I was in middle school, kids, like I was in like the early 2000s where, kids were still using gay as, like a slur, but also like I remember the revolution of realizing that you and a girlfriend could like say I love you, and realizing, oh, there's actually nothing weird about this. It is totally okay to love your friends, and that even if you do love them in a bi way or a gay way, that's actually not very weird. And I remember how it felt to like hold hands with a girl for the first time and realize, oh, there's nothing weird about this. This is totally normal. I had a friend in high school who we would walk around and hold hands in school just because it made all of the weird homophobic kids freak out all the time. Like, they would literally be like, are you guys actually gay? And I'd be like, I mean, does it bother you? Does it change things, So like, I get why Alyssa is so terrified, because for her, it's such a prominent fear because it's her actual identity, like, I didn't know my sexuality back then. I had not realized I was bi yet. To me, I was just like exploring the whole fact that there is literally nothing wrong with people of the same sex being able to love each other and be, platonic friends, right? Platonic love. But the point is, for Alyssa, that, middle school, when they see you holding hands with someone, when they see you hugging someone, when they see you being super chummy, they're like, oh, Alyssa and Shanae, the new girls are so weird, And like you said, Alyssa was so obvious about it. And
Yeah,
so she had to blend in. She had to make herself seem like she's quote, quote, normal, like she's just like all the other girls, that she likes the same things they do, because they would flay her.
it's that same thing as Kousuke, where like he's trying to be successful because maybe if he's successful enough, it will make up for the failure he is as a person. Where for Alyssa, maybe if she acts normal enough, it'll cover up and make up for the parts of her that will be ostracized. Where like if you fit the mold so perfectly enough in every other aspect, then maybe they won't see what's hiding beneath the surface and they can't cast you out for it. And like with the bullying, Shanae, as much as we know it affected Shanae and it hurt her and it impacted her character in such a strong way, she is at the very least able to shirk off the physical what they're saying about her, because she knows it's not true. Like, the fact that people are bullying her and are saying mean things about her and hate her, that still hurts. That still stings. But she doesn't believe the actual statements that they're making, and she fights them and she argues against them. She says, like, no, like, that's not true. It's not true. It's not true. Whereas for Alyssa, she can't shirk it off because it, like, the fact that they're using it against her isn't right. Like, the fact that it's being framed in a negative way isn't true, but what they're saying about her is true. And, like, once that, what is she going to say in response? You know, what can she say when she's being bullied for the very thing that she's afraid of in herself?
And the thing is, even if that wasn't the case, Shanae and Alyssa have such fundamentally different personalities when it comes to that. And that has everything to do with the way that they were raised. Shanae comes from a home where, sure, her father may be gone a lot, but he was always so reassuring to her. You know, we saw that with how she transferred schools in the first place, how he made sure to ensure that she did not feel like she was a burden, even though they had to transfer or they had to move because of the transfer. But he made sure that she knew it wasn't her fault that, you know, that situation had everything to do with that parent, with that kid who was bullying her, you know, that standing up for herself and defending herself was the right thing to do. Alyssa comes from, like you said, an emotionally and physically abusive home. She became the good daughter as a shield. The reason she can't handle confrontation is because in her home, confrontation gets you hit, because confrontation ends with your father screaming in your face. And, like, you know, like, obviously people respond to that differently. We see that Meg yells back, right? But Meg and Alyssa too are different people. People who grow up in abusive homes aren't always going to have those same response patterns.
And,
Alyssa
like,
responds by being complacent, by trying to be good, by trying to do everything she can to mitigate things so that it doesn't come to blows. And when it comes to that, she doesn't know how to deal with it. She runs away from it because she can't face it, because it's scary.
and, like, something that I think I've mentioned on the pod, like, at least once, but that gets me when people, like, talk about the way that Alyssa and Meg responded differently to their environment, is like, the reason that Meg fights back is because nothing is ever good enough for them from her. Like, they view her as a failure. Her father flat out says that she's a failure. And it's like, if nothing you can ever do is going to please them and is going to be good enough and is going to dissuade this abuse, like, you might as well just fight back, because what else do you have? Like, at least when you fight back, you get to live your own life to some degree. Whereas for Alyssa, like, it's clear that as long as she was playing the good daughter role that they wanted her to, she could be left alone in that way. And obviously it still terrified her. And, like, we see that both of these girls are so strongly affected by the pressure and tension in this home. But Alyssa was funneled into that option just as much as Meg was funneled into the option of being rebellious, because of the way that their parents perceived and responded to them. Where, like, Alyssa, like, she just so happened to have the personality and, like, skill set that her parents wanted in that way. And she didn't happen to have the, like, you know, like, conviction and, like, confrontational ability that Meg had. Whereas on the flip side, Meg didn't have the kinds of talents and skills that her parents wanted. And the areas that she does have stronger aspects in are the ones that came out in that rebellious daughter. And it's so much it's so much about the way that their parents responded to them and funneled them into these boxes. And, like, with their upbringing, again, like, thinking again about school, like, when we get that flashback in 243 to her home. Like, we know throughout school that she was saying, like, she has to, like, make sure that she can fit in and make sure that it's all okay and that, you know, her parents don't find out that anything is wrong. And she says to Noel, like, she was being abused at home. What good is it to be abused at school too when she came to school to try to escape it? But also her parents in that flashback say, and when Shanae comes to their home, they're concerned about whether or not Alyssa is fitting in. Like, that's the primary thing that they're worried about with school. And that seems, I forget if it's basically explicitly said or if I'm reading into something slightly. I think it's basically explicitly said that, like, essentially a condition of her being able to remain at school was fitting in. Where if she didn't fit in enough for her parents' satisfaction, even at school, she has to gain their satisfaction in that way. If she didn't fit in enough, they were going to pull her out because it was already such a hard sell for them to let her go in the first place. And once they pull her out, she's just back in that abusive home 24/7.
Which just further shows, like, it was such a desperate drive for Alyssa. And we see that it was desperate. I don't
She even says,
know
like,
how people miss that.
he says, like, you know, I was so scared and terrified, and I'm not proud of what happened, but I didn't know how to do anything else.
And I just feel like, again, it's so much like Kousuke, who she lacks so much of the she doesn't have experience with kids her age in that way, right? You know, like, Shanae has at least been through bullying before, you know, like, it sucked and it wasn't fun and it sucks to go through it again. But she had come out through the side where she realized, as long as you have a friend, you can get through this. But Alyssa did not have that experience. She was still in the experience of, it really sucks to have people who think that you're weird and who think that you're a freak and who see you for who you are and don't like you. And that's exactly how we have her in the present day right now, and how we see her on this awful, awful trajectory, because Gunn seduces her with this illusion of people loving her for who she is. Because, you know, we know it's not that she loves K-pop. It's not that she loves performing. It's not that she loves being an idol. It's that she got to write a song using the kinds of musical tones and themes that she personally enjoys, using lyrics that are clearly personal to her, that it was something that, you know, like you were saying earlier, it was such a vulnerable part of her that she was sharing with her fans, with people who are listening to this. And when Gunn takes and weaponizes their love of her song, you know, it's something that she is seeing this and she thinks that it means that they love her for who she is. Because if they love this thing that she shared, this thing that she created, this thing that is so much a part of her, then it must mean that they love a part of her, right? And like you said, I think Alyssa knows that unconditional love is not a possibility. But if she can get something that tastes like it, if she can find something that feels just enough like it, maybe that makes all of it worth it. Maybe that can be good enough. And so, you know, it's these people who like the song that she wrote. Clearly, they like this part of her soul. And that's what it is. Like, he is taking her soul and weaponizing it against her. And, you know, like, Alyssa is so much the character who is like, the means or the end will justify the means. And we aren't sure if that's going to be true for her. And we can only hope and pray and beg for her sake that that can be the case, because she is seeking that sense of security and comfort. And you're not going to find it in the idol world at all, obviously. Even if they love that little part of your soul that you bared to them. Because what happens when you write your next album, and, you know, like, what happens if you go solo and you get to write all of these songs that encompass all of these parts of yourself and all of these musical styles that you love and all of these things that make up who you are. And then they hate it and they criticize it. And they're like, oh, she was a one-hit wonder. Or like, oh, this album just feels like it's trying too hard. Or, worse, they're like, it's not commercial enough. It's too niche, What do you do when they take those parts of yourself that you're offering and they just stomp on it and set it on fire?
And like, so much of Alyssa is like, I use the light metaphor all the time, where she wants to be in the light so badly, and she had that, that like such bright light from Shanae, that bright, glowing, warm, accepting light. But the problem is that that light shines on all of you, and she's afraid of all of herself being seen for reasons aforementioned. And so she's trying so hard to have the next best thing because she doesn't feel like there's a resolution possible for the ugliness in herself. She doesn't think that it's possible for her to have that unconditional light that she truly wants. So she's trying to settle for the next best thing. And it's like, that next best thing, that artificial light, will never come anywhere close. But she's so far deep into sunk cost fallacy, where like, she's put herself in such a precarious, well, she hasn't put herself in such a precarious position. Really abusive adults around her have. But she's
ended up in.
Yeah, she's ended up in such a precarious situation where like, she has devoted all these recent years to becoming an idol. She's been moving and networking within this like dark world of these elite people. She's been targeted by Yui and Goon, who are people who do not let you go. She is famous, which means that anything she does from here on out is happening on a public stage. And like, she is also like the breadwinner for her family, most likely at this point, or like set up to be. And even if she's not the breadwinner, she is still like, she's the family success, she's the family success story. And it's just like, we know that the only way out of this is to get away from all of these people, like, to just chuck this entire world she's in the trash and start fresh. But
and for her, where she's at, like, the only way out is down.
Yeah, like, the only way out is to just try to ascend high enough up this ladder that these people are no longer in control of your life, that you can raise to their status, not with the intention of, doing what they do and hurting a bunch of other people, but just with the intention of, no one can tell me no. No one can tell me that I'm not allowed to be who I am and to live my life how I want it to when I reach this level. And we've said before, that's what she wants with the power couple so badly. We're like, if we know that this path is never going to get her there, because not only is she not going to be able to rise there with where she's coming from and the way that she's being guided, but that's also not what happens. And we see that through Yui. Yui is one of, if not the most powerful person that we've met in the comic, and she is not allowed to be her authentic self at all. But like, the only way actually out of this is, again, to chuck it all away and leave it. And similar to Kousuke, who is currently right now going through that like breaking point, that rock bottom, she would have to hit, like, she would have to go through what she can immediately see as being worse, where like, she would have to go through that like years of giving up who she is and everything that she wants to be and setting on paths that aren't her own for nothing in the end, because she would have had to abandon all of it, which we know that in the end it's still going to be for nothing. But in her eyes, from what she can see, one path has that hope of it being worth it, and the other path just has nothing waiting for her at the other end. The where do you go when you're a fallen idol? When the whole world has watched you fail, when you didn't complete normal high school, you didn't go to college, you didn't continue pursuing these other interests you had. So what other career like now you're unemployed, you're broke, you you might have to pay back money for the sponsors who have been supporting you this whole time that she doesn't have. You don't have a second career path to go. You have to start from the beginning with where you ended up. Similar again to Kousuke, who's going to have to find his identity after 30 years of working towards something that's not what he wants. She has to go back home, which is the worst of it. She has to return to their family as a failure, the thing that has always triggered their dad's abuse, the thing that makes Meg be treated like such garbage, the thing that makes Alyssa so afraid to do anything at all. She has to become the ultimate failure first and then go home to face all of that. And like, it's just what's waiting at the immediate other end of her stopping and giving it all up for the sake of going through Kosuke's trajectory and coming out better at the other end, it's so incredibly terrifying, especially for a character that we know has been terrified of basically that exact situation her entire life, with good reason.
I think with Alyssa too, I think it really depends on the nature of her fall, because and this is like the optimistic side, is that one can always hope that if she were to stay in the industry, maybe there are there are aspects where she could find a career that aren't necessarily something that she would loathe, right? Like, maybe she could go that singer songwriter producer route where she could do the parts of it that she loves, where, she gets to do the composition or the production, gets to do the creation element. But, we've talked a lot too about like what causes Alyssa's fall. Is she going to take a stumbler herself? Is her past going to catch up to her? There's definitely some pivotal characters who have already been set up who could very, very easily take Alyssa down with bullying allegations. The way that she disappeared from school after Shanae's fall is set up prime to make it look like Alyssa was the one behind the bullying, especially when you could frame it so easily as like, yeah, they were both the new girls in school, and then people didn't really like Shanae a lot, so she pushed her away, and then just
Threw
make
her
it
under the
look
bus.
like right. And again, I always hope and pray it doesn't go the direction that Alyssa would get outed. I don't think that suits Kimchi's writing style. But it is the kind of thing that I could see being used against her, especially in this industry. Because the thing about idols is, like your idols are meant to be kind of like your little stand-in girlfriend, right? Like guys want, especially with girl groups, right? Like you need to be able to believe that this girl could somehow be your pure little girlfriend. Um, so like if anybody were to ever leak allegations about Alyssa's sexuality, I mean, that would, like, again, like I feel like that would be a little too heavy in that direction in a way I don't think Kimchi would go. But, I know that we have talked a lot about how I think if it came out in a different way, that would be an interesting element to explore, if only because I think it would give Noel that understanding of why, you know, his fake relationship with this girl who he did at one point, like her, or at least have a crush on her, try to have this real relationship experience with her, and she never responded to him in the same way, have this understanding of, oh, that's why, you know?
She physically couldn't. It wasn't in her
Right.
capability. But also,
Right.
like, I feel with we know that sexuality is already being used against Alyssa in the industry and is going to continue to be used against her in the industry. And with Kimchi saying that she keeps the sexualities of the characters to herself because it's not directly relevant to the plot to be explicitly confirmed, says to me that it won't be directly outed, or that it's unlikely, like in addition to it not really being Kimchi's style.
Right.
But I think there's very much going to be more exploration of that kind of underlying theme of Alyssa constantly feels pressure to hide this, and she feels like other people can see through her, and she also doesn't want, like, Alyssa does not want to be gay. Like, that's one of the things that she hates so much about herself, because she doesn't think that it's okay. She doesn't think that she's allowed to be that. She thinks that it's a problem, that it's a blight. Like, very much that Noel thinks that his whole existence is a blight. She is like, this is a blight that needs to be corrected. But it can't be corrected because that's not how biology works. Where,
Right.
like, I think whether or not other people explicitly find out about it and kind of covertly use it against her, or it's just perceived, I think she's going to continue to feel the pressure to make sure that she denies in whatever way possible that this is a possibility. And I think that ties into the assault and abuse around her ramping up as time goes on, where part of it, and part of the way that she's probably going to normalize it, is being like, well, this experience proves that, nothing else is going on here, right? Where, like, it proves to her and it proves to other people that she can be with a man, and that's okay. Even though it's not okay at all, and we know that it's not okay, and we know that it's even more not okay because of how much her sexuality has already been a point of pain in her life. But, like, that's kind of the direction that I see it, where, like, it's going to help in pushing her further and further into that position of being exploited, partly because of all of those pressures, and especially with being a K-pop idol and harboring this at the same time.
That's where I always come back to, like, my little cozy impossible fantasy of wanting that Shanae, Alyssa, and even Noel reconciliation. Like, if I could write one very unlikely, impossible scene, it would be something of that nature. Like, I don't know how I would want it framed, but I would like Shanae finding out the truth somehow, right? And
Mhm.
just being, oh God, there we go. Just being
Oh
like
no!
so accepting of Alyssa in the way that she was always afraid Shanae could never be, right? Because, like, she herself can't accept that herself. She herself is so afraid, like, she herself has, like, feared that this is something wrong with her and has never been able to accept or love herself for it, right? And
Yeah.
for Shanae to accept her as that person and all of that, to be like, I love you not in spite of this, but I love you for who you are. Like, I never would have felt weird about this. This never would have been weird to me. I always would have loved you. Like, because that's, that is ultimately what Alyssa has always needed. In the same way that Kousuke needs somebody who says, you really suck, but I still love you and I still care about you and I want to help you be less of an asshole. Alyssa needs somebody who was able to see all of her because, like, Shanae saw 99% of her and loved her. Like, I think it is safe to say that in that short time, like, Shanae loved her. They were
That's why it hurt so much.
right. Like, that was her first real friend. And it hurt so much because she mattered so much. And like, she thought that she was the coolest person. She was so smart. She had like these really cool interests that other kids aren't so into, and that just made her so cool. And like, for Alyssa to have let herself be so fully embraced by somebody, to let herself be seen, like what you say about Shanae's light versus the artificial light, and how I think that is the thing that people misunderstand the most about Alyssa, is thinking that she's seeking attention and fame when all she's really seeking is, a false creation or false recreation of Shanae's light, something that can make her feel the same way Shanae did, but without having to expose all of those parts of herself that she never wanted. Like, if I could write one impossible scene into I Love You, it would be Shanae accepting Alyssa for the entirety of who she is. And that, as a result, Noel also would, because then he would be like, oh, that's why you were such a shitty girlfriend to me. That's why you didn't want to be my girlfriend. I get it now. Okay. Because like, it's one thing to be like, oh, my girlfriend doesn't like me. It's another to realize, oh, my girlfriend doesn't like any dude. Because like, that's Noel's thing. Like, he thinks that she was cheating on him, like, she thinks he's been with other people because she doesn't care about him, as opposed to, like, I still firmly believe that Noel is or was Alyssa's safety relationship, like, it only afforded her so much protection, obviously, clearly, but like, it afforded her some kind of protection, right?
Yeah, and like, there's a reason she didn't want to let it go. There's a reason why she came to him after what happened to her before 243. Like, she viewed him as safe. She didn't view him as like a typical boyfriend, because she doesn't want a boyfriend. She never did. She never will.
Sorry,
like,
Noel.
But no, like, she did very genuinely find safety in that relationship until it became unsafe and it changed. And like, that's so much what happens to her, where she starts to feel safe in a relationship with somebody, whatever kind of relationship it is, and then something in the world changes and it's not safe anymore, and she's so desperately trying to achieve safe connections and safe love, but it's not possible in the world that she's currently in, because there are so many predators circling her. Like, she's trying to hold on to a safe person in the middle of a shark tank. And
I was literally picturing a Shark Tank.
yeah, and that's really what's happening to her. Like, she's there's no island for them to go to. Like, they're just holding each other in the middle of a shark tank, and the only way out is to dive through the sharks. But how much scarier is that than trying to not be attacked in the tank?
Something I think about a lot when we talk about, especially Kousuke and Alyssa, is the concept of the world essentially reinforcing or validating particular beliefs and fears that somebody holds, right? Because that's one of the arguments people have against Kousuke and especially Alyssa, is that, oh, well, they should know better, right? But like you said, for Alyssa, every time she finds somebody who's safe, something happens to kind of ruin that for her. Something happens to destroy that security. And all it really does is reinforces and validates this belief, this idea that she doesn't deserve this, and that, she hasn't earned this yet, that this is not the route that she can go, which, is awful, because we know that that was the route. Shanae was her route to safety and security and comfort. But the way that everything spiraled out, the way that it impacted her ability to stay in school and therefore stay out of her abusive home, the way it impacted her ability to cope with the bullying, the way it impacted the potential of her being outed and, back to point one, possibly going back to further abuse, meant that there was no way for her to continue on that path. So it validated that Shanae was not, in fact, a viable option for comfort and security. She had to try another option. And likewise, like you said, with Noel, he did start out as safety and comfort. And, I don't know when I think it, obviously, it changed somewhere more recently, but I think when Yui swept in, at some point in time, she has acknowledged that Yui is not who she thought she was. She's still in that denial phase, the, life is easier with your eyes closed phase. But, she knows that this was not exactly the path that she thought it was going to be, but she's already on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right, it's just I think people have to keep in mind that when you make choices, obviously the circumstances, results are what define how you believe things, right? That's just our basic science, right? That's 8th grade science for us. It's here's my hypothesis, this is the result, this is what I learned. And unless you conduct more experiments, you don't have enough evidence to truly know what you learned. Alyssa obviously is not getting the chance to do that. So she only has these bare experiences that are telling her, hey, you tried to find safety and security here. That wasn't it. Go find something else. And I think that thing too, when we go way back to our earlier points about her socioeconomic status, much like Kousuke, is that they come from those worlds where the people who have power are the people who are revered, people who have status, people who are at the top. Like you were saying earlier, that is why being a part of a power couple is so important to Alyssa, because to her, you need power. That is the only time she'll be free. The only time that she can feel safe is when nobody can tell her no. And like you said, Yui proves to us that even in a power couple, you aren't actually safe and secure. You still aren't at the top. But Alyssa can't see that, she's at this lower rung looking up. And when you're looking up, you only see things from the outside. And from the outside, she's seeing that's where the sky is.
And something that's really important when we look at our characters and be and try to say it doesn't make sense that they picked this option. Why did they pick this option? Why didn't they think that they could pick something else? And should they have known better? Is what is it that our characters can actually see? Because for example with Shanae, going back to that kind of Shark Tank analogy, we know that if you dive through the sharks and you make it to the other end, there's an island that you can stay on and be safe. But from the middle of that tank, from where they're sitting, that island's out of view. It's covered by the fog. It's too far away. It's still there, but they can't see it. And a lot of the times when we're able to see something from such a bird's eye point of view, we really assume that the characters can see a lot more than they actually can. And that goes back to when she went along with Yui, where she saw Yui as this amazing, sparkling, probably godlike woman who is everything that Alyssa could ever hope to be, who is allowed to be her authentic self, who no one can tell no to, who is admired and revered and loved and accepted. And she was like, if I go with her, I can not only escape my current abusive situation, but I can set myself up to never have to feel that way again and earn that power to be myself, which is obviously something that we know is not the case, but that's so much what Yui must have looked like. And at the same time, like, people will often go, well, she was friends with Noel. She knew Noel. Like, shouldn't she know that, Yui is abusive to Noel and they don't get along and he hates her? And, like, why does she trust Yui with all this? And it's like, when have we ever actually seen Noel letting his friends in on that? And they only knew each other for a couple of months, like, according to the timeline. If that, like, it happened very, very early on. And Kimchi gives us those panels of them as their little kid selves to show that they never moved past that point. They never got to know who each other really are. And it's like, it's easy to go, well, when we look at this character, like, it's so obvious, right? Like, it's so obvious to us that Yui and Noel don't just have a normal my stepmom kind of doesn't like me relationship. It's like, to the people in the comic, to even Shanae, who we don't fault for it the same way that people fault Alyssa for, even though Shanae knows Noel a lot better than Alyssa knows him, doesn't see
Look
it
how
either.
long, look how long it took Shanae to realize who Noel was afraid of.
Right. And like Dieter and Soshi didn't know either. And it's like, we can see it so clearly because A, we're watching from a bird's eye point of view. B, we're not like a teenager in these people's lives trying to like navigate our own lives and theirs. And like, we also get bits and pieces of their perspective. We follow them around. We see their whole life. Like, we're not this character who's only seeing snippets and like
Right.
looking at it through only what's left after they're processing their own life. And it's like, no, it makes complete sense that she legitimately doesn't understand and doesn't know, that she just thinks that Noel is someone like Meg who gets targeted because they act out, and that even if their family is kind of awful, like it surely it can't be that bad, and if he just went along with things it would be better, especially because look at how benevolent Yui is. Like, they just have a conflict. There's tension there, but if they tried to bridge it together, it would be better. As opposed to us, where we can see like, this is a woman who's trying to destroy him for no other reason than the circumstances under which he was born, and there's a lot of deep, deep abuse there. But
I
how on
think
earth?
there's. Oh, go on.
I was just gonna say, but how on earth can we assume that another character is able to see the same thing when we're being given the clues in the comic to see that a their perspective, their like point of view, their scope of field is pretty limited, and it's not their fault that it's limited.
I think there's even really good potential for a parallel being drawn in the same way that Shanae looks at Alyssa's family and feels that sense of, wow, my life would be so much better if I had this family, if I had what Alyssa has. Even though we are able to sense that Alyssa has a turbulent and eventually realize that it is, in fact, an abusive home, and know that that is exactly why Alyssa wants out of her home. Likewise, Alyssa is looking in at Noel's family, and like like you said, we can deduce that Alyssa and Noel have never really truly opened up to each other. That's part of their problem, is they both wear their masks so well that neither one of them really get into each other's real selves. And it's very likely that Alyssa is looking in at this family going, wow, if I had a mother who was like Yui, my life would be so much better. Look at her. She's so benevolent. She's so wonderful. She's so strong. She's nothing like my own mother. Like, it's probably very much the same way where she's looking at, where like Shanae, Shanae even kind of picked up on it, remember? Like, she asks
Yeah.
Alyssa at school, is everything okay at home?
And she even like, even after she's remarking about like, if only she kind of had all the things that Alyssa had, how great it looks over there, she even says like, Alyssa doesn't seem happy. And she's like, if I lived Alyssa's life, would I be unhappy too?
Right. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for Alyssa to be looking in at Noel's life because, by all technicalities, because Noel is essentially a Hirohara. He is living up from where she is. She sees Yui as a major upgrade to her own mother. She sees his family, quote, quote, family, as an upgrade to her own family. To her, all of this is so much better. And again, Yui wears her mask so well that Shanae was blinded, so well that Dita and Soshi have been blinded. That is like the insidious aspect of Yui, is that she fools everyone. Noel tells Shanae that he, warned Alyssa, but I really wonder what he actually said to her, because when Shanae
He
asks
doesn't warn
about her,
Shanae.
exactly. And it could be that, he's been here before, so he's like, oh, maybe it doesn't matter. But it's also like, if you've been here before, shouldn't you try harder? And that's a whole other point that,
And I'm gonna say, like, Noel says a lot that, well, not necessarily a lot, but he says that he doesn't even know what it is that he's scared of. Like, as much as he wants to dissuade people around Yui, because a part of him does know that that's what he's scared of, he doesn't trust his own judgment to a certain extent. So, like, how do you explain to someone why they should stay away from Yui when you can't even, like, verbalize what the problem is? And I think that's so
right.
much of it, where, like, obviously he looks uncomfortable. Like, everyone can see that he's uncomfortable and there's tension, but, like, clearly no one picked up on what exactly it was and why it's there. And, like you said, that includes Shanae, that includes Dieter, that includes Soshi, that includes Alyssa, where, like, obviously they all know that there's tension between the stepmother and her son, but they don't realize that it's something beyond a normal fractured relationship.
Right. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense for Alyssa to first off be looking at Yui thinking, wow, if that was my mom, my life would be so much better. And then to be looking at Noel and seeing that, yeah, this just feels like he's really reluctant to accept her as his stepmom. They've got a really rough relationship. Like you said, kind of seeing him in the way that she sees Meg, very much like, if you would just be more complacent, if you would just go with things more, things wouldn't be so difficult. You're making things difficult for yourself. And obviously that isn't entirely fair to Noel, because that wasn't the truth. But I don't think Noel was offering up the truth to her, because he wasn't offering the truth up to anyone else.
Yeah,
He didn't offer the truth up to Shanae.
It's the same way that, like, he hasn't offered the truth to Alyssa, he hasn't offered it up to Shanae or Dieter or Soshi, and the same way that Alyssa hasn't offered the truth up to Noel. And it's just like so much of my thing with the characters is, like, we need to hold them all on an equal playing field, where, like, we acknowledge very much that, like, sometimes Noel and Shanae don't have all the information and don't have a wide enough perspective to see what they need to see. And that applies just the same to Kousuke and Alyssa. And a lot of times, I know we spend a lot of time defending them, and, like, people might be tired of it, but it's just like we still see it happening and coming up so much, where, like, people, because other people have this bird's eye view and aren't looking at it directly through their perspective, they don't want to accept that this really is the perspective that that person had. They wouldn't have made these choices if they had a broader perspective. And all of the characters do that. That's part of the whole thing with, like, Shanae is, like, making everyone pull their hair out right now in all the fast passes. Because she can't see beyond this bubble of hers, and we can see it, and we're like, Shanae, girl, you just gotta chill. Like,
You are too feral. I need you to take several chill pills.
But it's just, all of the characters have a point where their perspective of the world ends, the same way that, like, I can't see what's outside my house right now. Like,
right, though.
Yeah, and it's like, that's how our characters end up in ultimately these bad choices, when they're having good intentions. It's when they can't see clearly to those outcomes. They can't see that island beyond the sharks, they're just operating with what's in their perspective, and the solution isn't anywhere in there. But how are they to know that?
The thing that we reiterate a lot lately is that clearly Kousuke wants to be a better person. It's just the information that he had at the time had greatly, greatly misled him. Alyssa doesn't want to hurt people. That is her fatal flaw, is that she cannot make the decisive choices that would hurt fewer people because she is trying to seek a non-existent opportunity where she can hurt the fewest people possible. Those kind of opportunity or those kinds of options don't exist. We often have to make choices where we hurt people and then, accept the blame for it. Alyssa hasn't learned to do that, but that doesn't mean that she is intentional in wanting to hurt people. I don't think any of the times that Alyssa has hurt Noel was ever because she wanted to hurt him. I think she probably feels actual remorse. It's just that, much like Kousuke, Alyssa lacks a lot of emotional development. She's never learned to really take accountability for the things that she says and does. She
was
does
never allowed
deflect a
to.
lot. Right. And it's a lot like Kousuke where you don't really admit to those mistakes. And that's not good. And that is something that I do want to see from both of them. I think we're obviously going to be seeing Kousuke go down that path eventually. I don't know what it's going to take for Alyssa to get there. But that is one of her weaknesses, is that she's so afraid of her accountability. And I think that goes back to that feeling of hating herself, because it's like, if you accept accountability, this is just yet another flaw, yet another reason for people to dislike you, even though that goes back to like letting yourself be a burden to others is, a part of being loved is,
It also goes back to her parents, where like, in what world would they have let her actually take accountability for anything? And even if they did, which it very much seems like they didn't, because she was supposed to be their golden child, which is also most likely what happened in middle school, where they pulled her out, which is why she wasn't able to go back and take accountability for anything. We don't know if she would have or not, but she wasn't even given that opportunity. Where like, if there's a scenario where they did allow her to, what's the result of that from them, from these people who are so clearly abusive,
Right. And I do feel like the chicky sweater is probably Alyssa's one attempt at accountability, and it's also one of those things where it's like, what do you say in that kind of situation,
Right? Especially like, this is a
Hey
girl who had
girl,
like
I liked you so much. You mean so much to me. So sorry I pushed you out the window. Literally, totally did not mean to do that. That was such an accident. Can you come back and be my girlfriend? Like, like how, like, I mean, obviously, like, Alyssa and Shanae obviously needed to talk about that, because it wasn't just about the push, right? Like for Shanae, it was so much more about like everything that led to it. Because again, even in that moment, Alyssa was, struggling with the whole like trying to defend Shanae, but in a way that wasn't going to, like reflect on both of them. The fact that the girls they were bringing in the sexuality rumors. Like, they didn't say it explicitly, but they were bringing it up. But I do feel like that sweater was her one attempt at accountability, and it's just like, what do you even say in that situation? How do you face that person? Like, the fact that that is probably the experience that she's at least tried to at least take some accountability, even if, obviously it didn't really come across like
she wanted to. She
right.
tried. She did what she could in the moment with what she had. And like, this is also a person who in their 18 years of life has had half a year of normal socialization.
Right.
Like just let that sink in. Like,
right. I
half
feel
a
like
year.
it feels like a really good parallel to Kousuke trying to face Noel in the hospital. Like,
Yes.
he couldn't face him. He wants to. He couldn't, but he wants to. And again, like, I'm reiterating it again. I apologize to all of you guys who call this out in the comments. I've seen it. I repeat things. That's just my style.
They're
Kousuke wants
important.
to be a good person. Alyssa doesn't like hurting people. She may not know how to take accountability. She may be terrified of it because she probably feels like it's just like yet another flaw for people to hate, yet another thing about her that is so ugly and so wrong. But I don't think she enjoys hurting people. She's not Yui. I know people think she's on a path to become Yui, but I don't think she is. Alyssa doesn't take pleasure from other people's pain. She doesn't seem to enjoy other people's pain. When Noel was having a nice little Yui parallel in the hospital, like, Alyssa wasn't trying to hurt him because it made her feel better. It was Noel who was trying to hurt her because it made him feel better.
And like, her response when we do see her reflect on these things is guilt and shame and fear and remorse. Like, she so strongly doesn't want to be hurting people. She's trying her best to not, and it's just happening. And she doesn't know what she can do about that. Or, like, yes, accountability is frightening to her. And that's even more frightening than probably any, like, not any of these other things, but a lot of these other things. And like, is she not taking accountability just because she hasn't been given the opportunities to, or also because she's afraid to? It's probably both. But that doesn't mean that internally she's shirking it off. You know, where like it's clearly eating her up inside.
Right. And I think for me, that's kind of like my barometer of whether or not a character is, like, if I think that, because again, we don't like the boxes of like, are they a good or a bad character, right? But for me, it's kind of like, what truly are their motives? Do they actually enjoy the harm that they're causing, or do they actually feel guilt and remorse and shame? Because those are signs that somebody is not enjoying what they're doing. Like, Alyssa obviously has a lot to learn and a lot of growing to do. And unfortunately, I don't think she's in a position that's going to afford her a lot of that. I would love to see it for her, obviously. Like, if I could go in and swaddle her also in a nice weighted blanket and, bring her to a therapist and sit her down and say, listen, baby girl, I know what you are and it is perfectly okay. I promise. I promise.
You're allowed.
But
You're allowed
you're,
to be yourself.
I'm
In
sorry
whatever
that
that
you,
you.
I'm sorry that your parents failed you, but I and Elle and Lisa are your new mommies now. You see that?
We will
You see
parent
that
her.
you don't need a daddy. You see that?
No,
It's
Alyssa
okay.
needs a household of loving, strong, compassionate moms.
Yes.
That is what that girl needs.
And like, I can understand people too, like, not liking Alyssa because of those elements. It's
And like,
just
she
like her for those elements. Like, I want people to at least just see Alyssa for what she really is, who she really is. Let's stop pretending that she likes attention, because it's not the attention. It is the false illusion of security and comfort that she thinks this is going to provide her. It's not even the attention. It's like the idea that having this sense of a fandom or something like that is going to provide her that sense of security.
Yeah, and it's like, it's just so clear that she is just a girl who is so incredibly scared all the time and feels like she has no worth or value or power, and that she can't make anything happen for herself, and she just has to try the best she can with the cards that she's given, and it leads to such horrible outcomes. But that, like we said, like she's not malicious, and she genuinely doesn't realize that another option could lead her to somewhere positive, because that would require having power in who she is, and that's the part of her that she really, really lacks, and that I wish so strongly that she could actually find, because that's truly what she needs. The ultimate Her ultimate goal is acceptance, and she thinks that it's a goal of acceptance from other people, but really her ultimate goal is unconditional and unwavering acceptance from herself.
Oh,
And
why is that gonna make me cry?
I
God,
think
I
I think that's really the saddest thing about her. Where, like, she just doesn't love herself at all. She doesn't accept herself. She doesn't think that's possible. And she thinks that she needs other people to accept her to make up for the acceptance she can't give herself. Again, like how Kousuke thinks that he needs to make up for his own personality being a failure, even though it's not. She thinks that she needs the acceptance of other people to make up for the fact that she can't accept herself. She's not allowed to accept herself. There's nothing about her to be accepted. And, like, what she just so badly needs to learn that she's okay. And the the acceptance that she needs and that matters and that she's really chasing at the end of the day is from herself. And she does have the power to make that happen. And the reason that she doesn't think that she has that power is because she hasn't used it.
think she really strongly parallels Shanae in these two ways, both in that they saw themselves as these really worthless, unlovable people, but also they both share that intense, strong, driving need to live their own lives. Like that's exactly what we're seeing from Shanae right now. Like so much of why she is fighting and clawing and like screaming at people is because she is so tired of people making choices for her. She is so tired of people telling her what to do. She is so tired of being pushed around and not being allowed to do things the way that she wants to do things. And that is exactly what you just said of Alyssa. She wants to live her own life. She wants to do things the way she wants to do it. She and Alyssa are complete mirrors in that exact way. They both have that same desire to be their own individual person, to have their own freedoms, and to be able to live their lives whatever way they want, whether or not they're going to mess it up themselves. That's their choices to do it. But they also have that shared feeling that they are so unlovable and worthless. And obviously, Shanae is now diverging from that because she's starting to see that that's not so true. But that's that foil. That's that juxtaposition because Shanae has always had people. She's had her father. She's had Minhyuk and Maya. She's now got a whole group of friends who have had her back. Even if, Noel, if she feels like he's turning his back on her, she still has people and they have made her feel like she is worth fighting and she's worth fighting for. And like you said, Alyssa can't even love herself because there's nobody else loving her either. Like I am not one of those people who thinks that like nobody's going to love you if you can't love yourself first, because clearly, like Shanae has learned to love herself because other people have loved her too. But Alyssa doesn't have that. She did have it once, and everything went so wrong that she was convinced that she couldn't have that and she had to go elsewhere. And now she's in a situation where is she going to get it? Like nobody can get close to her because she is an idol. She is very much in a situation now like Kousuke where you can't trust that people approaching you are going to have authentic desires in what they seek from you. Like aside from all of the awful sexual harassment stuff, right? Like anybody who seeks a relationship with her very likely could be trying to get something. Either they want to climb higher by using her, or, they want to bring her down. They're, just somebody who is trying to get ahead. How do you know? How do you form authentic bonds in her line of business?
And especially when you're already someone who struggles to trust and be vulnerable and show yourself, because even without all of those added pressures, it still feels like it's just a weapon to be used against you, no matter who it is. And it's so sad.
Like, because like even with Kousuke, we know he's got people. He's going to have Shanae. He's still got Hansuke. There is a chance he might reconnect with his college friends. Even if like not right now, maybe later down the line, right? Like, I don't think they would be reintroduced if they weren't going to have some kind of role at some point in time. Alyssa doesn't have any of that. And like, that's why I need the scene of Shanae and Alyssa reconciling. Like,
it would do so much, especially because like when you were talking about the parallels between two of them and their like need for acceptance and authenticity, it's like, isn't it funny that these just so happen to be the two girls who met on that day of middle school as the new kid, and like it just all went so sour, and they need to heal that part of themselves.
right? Like, the part of me that like loves romanticism and cycles and bookends just feels like it would be so poetic for her and Shanae to be able to actually make up.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the healing alone, because Alyssa carries that with her. Just to know that Shanae, how much she actually meant to Shanae, because that's the thing. Like, we've talked before about how Shanae was a person who always felt like she was so easily discarded, like she meant nothing to Alyssa when she clearly meant the whole world to her. But for her to know how much she actually meant, like, it just, she needs that. She needs to hear that she has mattered before, because that authenticity, we've talked about how, Minhyuk was so popular because people liked him for who he truly is. Charisma is not something you really fake. Like, either you are somebody who's great with people or you're not. And Alyssa, God bless her, is like, she does not have that it factor. But it's part of that is because she held herself back, maybe
Like,
she could be somebody who's like vivacious and charming if she fully let herself be who she really is. But she's never
it's
allowed
like
herself that.
everyone who saw elements of the real Alyssa thought that she was a cool person. Like she was never gonna be like the Minhyuk of the school where like she gets along with everybody. Because quite honestly, the personality that she actually has is kind of too niche for that. But
She's
like,
too prickly.
but like everyone who did see aspects of her real personality thought that she was like a cool and awesome person and liked her for it. Where like no one just met her and like didn't like her because of who she was. Like,
If,
they might
if
not have like loved her like everyone just gets along with Minhyuk, but like no, like the people who like took interest in her did love her. And that's part of what was so sad about it. And that's something that Noel says in 243. Like, as much as I have my issues with Noel in 243, um that is one of the things that he says that did hit really hard, that he did think she was such a cool person, and like his perception of her was much more shallow than Shanae's perception of her, but it was still more real Alyssa than most other people have seen, because like 99% of who Alyssa is never shown to the world at all.
Alyssa and Kousuke just both suffer so greatly from the fact that, I mean, and to some degree also Noel, like they're so constantly trying to protect themselves that they live in this shell like obviously for Kousuke, it's partly also that like so much of his identity was thrust upon him that, you know, this is partly who he is by the design of somebody else. But still, like, a lot of it is this exterior shell that's meant to protect him because he, like Alyssa, inside yearns for something that he believes he's not allowed to have. And I think that's so much part of their problems is that they live inside of this exterior shell that prevents people from getting too close.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the people who do get close, you know, eventually get pushed away for some reason. And that's obviously the biggest issue is how do you get close to these people when those shells are so thick?
Yeah, and especially when like their whole need is that authentic, unconditional love, and it's just under these conditions, it's impossible to reach them. And I'm going to say we have to wrap up soon. We had an ask for somebody to get from somebody
Yes.
to give our thoughts on why Alyssa was feeling drawn to Kousuke at the Christmas party and before that. And they said, because I was convinced she had a crush on him, but then I thought it's just because she's projecting her feelings towards Yui on Kousuke. But after the current events in the comic, I'm not so sure that is the case.
Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Okay. I just wanted to go first because first off, thinking that Alyssa had a crush on Kousuke was entirely how I became a born again Kousuke and Alyssa fan in the first place. I only began paying attention to these characters, like actually paying attention to them and starting to read into them because I was starting to look into this, you know, like crush and being like, oh wow, Alyssa's kind of weird about Kousuke, and even weirder, Kousuke's kind of weird about Alyssa. Like, listen, I have not forgotten how long Kousuke stares at his phone before he actually calls Alyssa when he's looking for Noel. Like, that stands out to me to this day. Anyway, to this day, I think it's more like I think it's one part projection, one part the bigger plan, right? Because if Alyssa comes from a family who is strongly homophobic, and even more so if she comes from a family who has like that socioeconomic status where, you know, you carry on the family name, or I guess in their case, not so much family name, but you know, your role is to go and marry some nice affluent man with a nice status so that you can have some nice babies with him and carry on the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Alyssa probably knows at some point in time she and or Meg, and let's be real, she knows it's going to be her, has to get married to somebody. And if she has to marry somebody, and obviously it's going to be a man, she has an idea of what kind of person this has to be, right? Because again, Alyssa wants to be part of a power couple. She wants freedom. She sees what Yui has and she wants that for herself. And what is Kousuke if not mini Yui? And I don't mean this in that like Kousuke equals Yui because she has a crush on Yui, although like I know that is a popular theory. I think it's more that because Kousuke is part of the Hirahara family. They are like the family. They are the ones. If you can get a Hirahara man, girl, you're set. Who's going to tell Kousuke no? Who's going to tell you, Mrs. Kousuke Hirahara, no? Like, look at Yui. She has free run, free reign. Does Rand ever tell her no? Does Rand tell her what to do? Does Rand tell her how to live her life? No. She wants what Yui has. Also, you know, like she clearly doesn't know Kousuke very well. And Kousuke, you know, like everybody perceives Kousuke as being the perfect gentleman. He kind of has that, you know, like princely appearance. I think she probably expects that he is, you know, more of the gentle one. I don't know how well Alyssa perceives those parallels in the way that, you know, like she is unto Kousuke where Meg is unto Noel, you know, like Noel is the rowdy one, quote, quote, rowdy. He's the one who gets into trouble. He's the troublemaker. Kousuke's the good son, the successful son. He's the one who's going places. I think she was drawn to Kousuke because he is kind of like that ticket to success, but he's also like everything she wants to be. He appears like he's got it all together. He appears like he is independent and you know, he's living this independent life. It's everything she wants and she wishes she could have for herself. I know you and I have talked a little about this, so I won't go too much into it because I know you will. But I do think there's a little bit of like heteronormativity where it's just like, if I have to be with a man, this is the man, and trying to, you know, like push herself into that. But yeah, I think it had a lot to do with just like being so drawn to this idea, you know, like Kousuke maybe became this safe space for her ticket.
Mhm.
You know, like when she hears that Kousuke's going out of country and she shows more reaction than she did to Noel leaving the country, it, you know, like she's worried because it's like, if he leaves, how do I get closer, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's like, I think it's ultimately has a little bit of multiple facets in it. I think
Mhm.
so much of like why Kosuke specifically and why so much draw to him and so much focus on him is that like she, like you said, she knows that part of her role in this life and in the way that her family structure is, and the fact that she also comes from a very seemingly patriarchal family where like she basically refers to her mom as the doormat and the dad's the breadwinner. Where like, I mean, she and Meg are being pushed to be successful in and of their own right, but also that family only had daughters. Like we don't know what the different dynamic might have been like if there was a son. Um, but like even though like she has a little more taste of feminism than someone that like her mom has, part of her role is, like you said, get married and like continue the family lineage and become mommy and all that jazz. Um and like, you know, she's currently with Noel. She clearly feels a need to have a relationship with a man for a multitude of reasons, the primary of which being that is what she thinks society wants her to do, and it hides the fact that that's not really what she herself wants. Um, but Noel isn't the person that she wants for that. Like, she likes him enough as a person, but you know that's not enough, especially when you're not in this relationship for love in any way, shape, or form. Like she needs someone who carries that perceived status and ability to be a power couple that she wants, and Kosuke very much is that, and he does that in a non-threatening way, where he's also this like, always had like kind of soft boy, this gentleman, and I do think that she can feel some of those mirrors with herself, where like
There's
they,
similarities in taste.
yes, they
Like they're,
share these
yeah.
similarities.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think he resonates with her on a level that she might not be fully aware of, but like they have that same taste for the finer things.
Yes, and like I do think there is probably some element of projection from like that sparkling woman that Yui was onto her doppelganger Kosuke, both in general, but more so in that status.
Hmm.
Which she did a similar thing with Noel, where she saw that like bright, vivacious, smiley Shanae in that Youngie smile and tried to make it the same, and it didn't really work. And she's kind of trying to chase that like status and life and person that Yui is through a potential relationship with Kosuke, where like it's not so much that she is actually romantically interested in him, but just interested in all of those things that he represents. And that especially gets confounded when we add in something like compulsive heterosexuality for someone who so clearly is afraid and ashamed of the fact that she is a lesbian. She is gay. She is interested in women. She's not interested in men at all. And she lives in a world where she has to be, where like that is the norm. That is what people want from her. That is what she believes is right. That is what she believes is the only correct option. And so it's very, very common for people who live in a heteronormative world to experience compulsive heterosexuality, where they project feelings of attraction onto someone that they just kind of like have like a normal like relationship with, like we're attracted to people in all sorts of different ways, and like projecting what is like admiration or platonic or comforting attraction as romantic or sexual attraction onto somebody because of compulsive heterosexuality and that kind of denial of your actual sexuality, whether conscious or unconscious. And so I think she kind of thinks that she has a little bit of a thing for Kousuke, but it's never shown in anywhere near that same intensity as Shanae. Like we get a very, very clear contrast right after the Christmas party, being like, you thought that Alyssa was like flustered and crushing on someone? That was nothing. Like, let me show you what an Alyssa who's actually interested in someone romantically looks like, because
in fact, like obviously that contrast, we're talking about that moment where, you know, Kousuke tells her, you know, that like Noel's calling her out to dance, or your group mates and Noel are calling you out to dance, you should go. And like he's like, we, you know, they both walk out, and she does that little face and those little lines, and you know, like if looking back on it, it obviously feels more like Alyssa's been seeking Kousuke's approval. You know, like Kousuke and Rand are the people she hasn't won over yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying about like we can be attracted to people in lots of different ways. Like Kousuke and Alyssa are the people who I think, had they been given the chance, they would be such good friends in, you know, like a world where they weren't traumatized completely. You know, like they have those similarities. They have that taste for the finer things in life. They, you know, they could sit and talk about classical music together all day long, right?
Right.
I feel like, you know, for Alyssa, that was her having that moment where she's like, this is my breakthrough. We're having a moment. And it doesn't necessarily mean, oh, we're having a romantic moment. She may not identify what she thinks that moment is. For her, it's just like, this is a success. We had a successful conversation. I socialized. I'm getting an A+ in socializing. This is great. But yeah, I think it's very much that like she has great admiration for Kousuke, both as, you know, like this very successful and ambitious man who she thinks he is. And just like this, as well as like who, you know, him being this person who encompasses all the things that she wants and possessing the lifestyle she wants for herself. And so, yeah, I think it's a lot of projection. I very much agree with the compulsive heterosexuality, especially in a world where she knows that her own feelings about her sexuality aside, it's, you know, she's very likely not to get to be who she wants to be anyway. So why even consider that a possibility?
Right. It's like she's already resigned to the fact that she's going to have to marry a man. This is how it has to be. And that she also needs to be part of a power couple. And so this is it's such a clear, direct avenue essentially to her goals within the constraints that society has put her in, as well as like, you know, this is someone who literally mirrors her. Like it's comfortable, it's safe, and it's successful for what she needs. And so she very much seems to engage with that compulsive heterosexuality and project onto it. And like part of her can likely feel that, you know, this is not the same as like what she had with that girl in middle school. Like there's not that realness behind it in that way. But part of her is like, but I, you know, I clearly want this so badly. so it's got to mean something. But yeah, I think those elements kind of combining are what drives her interest in Kousuke and why it is significant, and we do see it as significant, and she gets those little fluster lines as well, but it's not that same like deep kind of raw, authentic, like encompassing type of attraction that she has with Shanae.
Right. It's like that feeling of satisfaction versus a feeling of a crush, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Man, Alyssa is like developing a bad pattern of like seeing something on a girl and then seeking it out in a man.
No, literally.
It's like
she just keeps doing it. Like
it's like, girl, this is a dangerous pattern. We got to stop it now.
it's like literally she has admirations and attractions and crushes on girls that she doesn't want to have, and so she just takes the best parts of them, and when she sees it on a man, she's like, ooh, there's a socially acceptable way for me to be interested in that, and like slaps it on like a sticker, and then she's like, why isn't it working?
Why is my Shanae standee not working for me? Gee, this is weird. He smiles just like her. I don't get it. Gee golly. And this is why I am so firmly of the belief that Alyssa is firmly a lesbian and not bisexual. This is not bi erasure. This is straight up, that girl she is not attracted to men.
Yeah, and like honestly, like I understand the concerns about bi erasure, especially because like it is a common thing, but like with all of the evidence that we have towards Alyssa being distinctly a lesbian, it would kind of be lesbian erasure to insist that she's not. Like I understand keeping the possibility open because like obviously like no character's sexuality is explicitly confirmed, but like quite obviously she leans at least very, very strongly towards gay and is most likely 100% gay. Yeah, and like Solidaritea just said, we've got other bi characters. Like have you seen Shanae?
Yeah. But right, yeah. I sometimes I like to feel the need to point it out just because I think bi erasure is when like you're just completely assuming that, you know, like just saying that there's no potential and no possibility for it, and like we have considered it and we have gone and said, nope, we've looked at the facts and we've looked at the evidence, and the evidence says she's a lesbian, Your Honor.
And her story makes so much more sense when she's a lesbian. Like it technically works either way, but it has so much more like,
because if you're bi, you can hide the other part, you know, like you can lean into, you know, if you're bi, you're like, okay, I can lean into this part of me and act like the rest of me, the other gay part of me, that the rest of it's not there. I can pretend that I'm perfectly straight.
And we see that's what she's trying to do, and it's not working. Like she wishes she could do that. Because as much as like that's not a way to live either, like that carries its own difficulties and hardships and hurt. Like she wishes she could do that, and she can't.
Like her life would be so much better and easier if she could just live that truth and deny the rest. Here, she doesn't even have a truth to live.
Yeah. Okay. And we are now about, I think,
2.5 hours.
We started
at 3.
3.5. Surprisingly, neither of us have crumpled into a pleading ball on the floor. That's great.
Shockingly.
Great for us.
We actually discussed this, and we have slotted Meg in for a different session.
Yeah, we felt like we had Shanae and Noel as one episode. We needed Kousuke and Alyssa as one episode. And also, we've already been 3.5 hours. Solidaritea, I understand that you just want longer episodes all the time and are trying to get us to drag out our time. but the people are complaining.
The people are complaining. We actually did initially forget to put Meg on the list, and then while I was looking at the list, like 10 minutes before we went live, I was like, we should do Meg.
We mentioned her in the bullets and didn't put her on. But I feel like Meg needs a long slot of time allotted for her.
So we have decided that she is going to get an episode with somebody else. It will be a surprise for now. Because unlike Rika, I think we definitely have significantly enough information to talk about Meg. We have enough evidence of what her goals and needs are. And we can kind of talk a little bit about the more controversial aspects of her. I don't want to get too heavily into that because I don't want this to be a defend and justify or, blah, 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 because people have very valid feelings about that. And I don't want to step on toes there.
It needs to be handled with a lot of care, which is why I feel like it's a long time. Because I have my critiques about how she's written. I also have my understandings about how she's written. And she needs a lot of time to delve into that in a way that is gives it the right care, just the right care that it deserves to have with the way that her character has ultimately come out.
Right. Especially since we try to approach this through, our textual evidence, if we could spend a whole episode talking about, the inappropriateness of Meg's relationship with Kousuke, whereas we could instead kind of talk about how Meg formed an unhealthy obsession with Kousuke in the first place because of the very unhealthy home life that she has.
Yeah, that's where it came from. And it's there's that multifaceted of we can understand how she got there and what the probable intention of that was, while also being this was a really inappropriate relationship.
Right.
But also, this is not a Meg podcast. Solidaritea, do not bait us into being here for another half hour. But yeah, she is on the docket. She will be getting her time slot. Alyssa was going to be long, and there was not going to be time for Meg, and also we had forgotten about her. But yeah, do we have any last things to say? Any questions from the chat? Any comments?
I think that sums everything up for me personally.
I agree.
I think we did a good job.
I'm proud of us. This was way more succinct and way less tear-filled than I expected.
I think it helps. Oh, what?
Oh, I was going to say, I think we've also, since we've talked about them so much, it gave us a little more of a constrained area to work within. And Solidarity just said, we got used to it. Where we were really just kind of consolidating a lot of things that we've touched on before and delving a little deeper into them. But
I also think a lot of the times that the crying happens, it's where the feelings kind of just come out, right? Whereas this is, you're kind of already in the mindset. We know that we're going to be talking about the really sad elements of their feelings. And I had my moments where I choke up, but it's because you're already in that mindset, it feels like it's not sneaking up on you, right?
Yeah,
whereas
we knew what was going to.
Which helps a lot because it means it's actually easier to talk about, because then I'm not, doing that very Scorpio thing where I just shut down. I'm I'm not going to let you guys perceive this.
And also hi just said we've I thought today was going to be more tearful, but we've already cried. Now we're talking about their characters together. Yeah. All right. This is the pod episode to end all pod episodes. The Alyssa episode, the culmination of what we always end up talking about, even though we don't mean to.
And now we can just reference people to this all the time, so that maybe we'll stop repeating ourselves all the time. We won't.
It's gonna keep. They're gonna keep, but maybe they'll show up a little less. Maybe for more consolidated and constrained periods of time.
We'll be like, refer to episode, what is this, 11?
This is episode 11.
Holy crap.
Oh my gosh, thank you to everyone who's like been here for 11 episodes of us, especially because all of them are over 2 hours long and now more of them are 3 hours than not 3 hours.
You guys really...
We love you.
We do.
Like,
We love
genuinely.
you guys.
We do.
I am constantly impressed. Like,
we're always good. Like, I know
like,
we said this early on, and we kind of stopped saying it for a little bit because, at least for me, I was like, I think it's going to be annoying if we just express our admiration for the audience every single episode. But like, in our like planning channel, we are just constantly gushing about like the response to the pod and like the like love that you guys show and the fact that people are listening and like enjoy this and like want to hear it and like come on this journey with us. We're like, this is not what we expected. we were just like, yeah, we're gonna get in a voice call and we're just gonna like speak all our brain rot and like 5 people will join us and we'll have a little chat and it'll be great. And like, we're just like, we love you.
we really do. Like, that's exactly what it is too. Like, I was sure that there would be some people who would be interested, but the fact that there are people who show up session after session, it's not really week after week, session after session, and if not for the sessions, who tune in and listen to us while you guys are multitasking around the house. Like that, I say it all the time, but that's what always gets me is just the thought of us keeping you guys company while you're doing the really mundane things. And that after Elle has made like 400 or 500 posts in Reddit and I've made 1,000 some and you guys still like to listen to us, it means a lot. So thank you, everybody.